The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com.
Welcome to the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from The Prophet's Way, A Guide to Living in the Now, which is largely my autobiography, essentially, a spiritual autobiography. This is from page 68, the chapter Changing the World by Changing Ourselves. The summer I lived in a teepee, I thought a great deal about the monastic experience. I'd read Dark Night of the Soul by St. John of the Cross and several books by Thomas Merton. And throughout my life had been drawn to the idea of solitude as a way of speeding up spiritual experience and growth. And that had certainly been my experience in my semi-monastic summer. I received knowledge and insights that I doubt I could have gotten any other way. Before I went into the forest and lived in that teepee, I'd always considered the monastic experience to be both intensely personal and intensely selfish. A monk, I thought, was a person working on himself and only affecting him or herself. But that summer, I realized that my spiritual practice was having an effect on the world. I could feel it. It was as if the world itself had a particular vibration made up of the buzz of all the life upon and within it. And when I was peaceful, it made the world a bit more peaceful. When I was agitated, the world became more agitated. My conclusion from this admittedly subjective experience was that I really was affecting the world, that monks are spiritual warriors, and that monasteries are places from which powerful beams of positive spiritual energy fan out from the men and women in them to transform and help the world. While not so common among the writings of contemporary monks, this view was clearly held by those people who chose the monastic life in the centuries and millennia preceding the last 100 years or so. And so I worked at making myself more pure so I could add purity to the world. But throughout this, there was also part of me that thought that this was a subjective experience, perhaps with no objective reality. It seemed on that level that it wasn't possible that I could be so closely connected to the world, that I could have any significant impact on it just by my state of being at any particular moment or throughout my life. Because it was me experiencing the world, then, of course, the world would change as I changed. My point of view is shifting or being contaminated by my own mental state at the moment. This assumption was the result of my training in science. Science is something unique to those cultures who were influenced by the Greeks or the Persians. In India, Chinese, and Native American cultures, there is no equivalent. They have philosophy and spirituality, which integrate what we call science with what we call mysticism. But in their classic traditions, they don't have what we would refer to as pure science. Two of the primary tenets of science are the things that things are ultimately divisible into tiny, definable building blocks, and then for there to be a true reality, the observer must be separate from the observed. In our dreams, we're both observer and observed. It's unreal. In daily life, we're the observer, and the things around us, separate from us, are the observed. So we think of them as real. In this worldview, the entire universe can be separated into pieces, the first and primary division being that of observer and observed, subjective and objective. Science believed, and Aristotle and Descartes and others taught, that if the subjective observer could rid himself of his personal and instrumentational subjectivity and identify all the relevant factors, then a truly objective truth about the world and reality could be seen, measured, and determined. This belief, accepted as an absolute truth and the underpinning of our modern culture, led to viewing humankind as separate from the natural world. The classic question, if a tree falls in the forest and there's nobody there to hear it as a sound made, assumes that nobody there to hear it means a human. Only humans, so the story went, were capable of classifying and separating things, breaking them into pieces, as Aristotle taught us, and understanding their separate meanings. Only humans would recognize sound as sound. But as science divided matter into smaller and smaller pieces, a disturbing trend began to emerge. It was found that supposedly inanimate matter seemed to be affected by the act of observing. The first response to this was Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, which stated that things were constantly in a state of flux. And so if anything were observed at any moment, by the time the observation itself was made, things had already changed. Therefore, it was impossible to ever truly and absolutely observe anything. Because by the time we'd registered the observation, by the time the photons of light had hit the retina of our eye, the thing we were observing had already changed. It was also noted that the act of observing was not purely passive. With an electron microscope, for example, electrons are bounced off of or passed through things to produce an image for viewing. Similarly, a conventional microscope only works when photons of light bounce off the specimen and into your eye. Light and electrons are bits of matter or energy that could have a demonstrable effect on the things being observed, further increasing the certainty of the accuracy of the observation. Heisenberg went so far as to say that the exact location of anything in time and space could never be known, regardless of method or instrumentation. So it seemed we really couldn't know anything as an absolute and real state. All we could do is engineering, working with things because they work, like electricity, even though we don't know how or why they work, which is in fact the case with electricity. This allows us to manipulate the world around us, to build machines and make things work, but it also leads to the dangerous assumption that to be able to use something is to know it. This is mirrored in human nature, too. We're constantly affected by our experience of life, and our experiences change our personality, our worldview, and our behaviors. And I'm not now the person I was before I met Herr Mueller, nor am I now the same person I was even a week ago or even 1 minute ago. We grow, change, and are constantly in a state of flux, and this provides us with an opportunity to develop the spiritual sides of ourselves, and by doing this, to make the entire planet more spiritual. So this aspect of the scientific approach turned out to be wrong. It was in fact not possible to separate the observer from the observed. The book is The Prophet's Way.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you, and it is midweek, midday, so it's time for Middays with Mark. Congressman Mark Pocan, brilliantly representing the 2nd District of Wisconsin. He is the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, the website pocan.house.gov. You can tweet him at Rep, R-E-P, Mark, M-A-R-K, Pocan, P-O-C-A-N. And Congressman Pocan, welcome back to the program. Hello? Whoop. I think he just tried to answer the phone and hung it up. He just vanished off my call board, Louise. So anyhow, he'll call back, I'm sure, and we'll have him on. He's going to be here for the hour taking your calls. The Congressional Progressive Caucus just released a statement. Oh, he's back. Great. Let me put this on. Congressman Pocan, welcome. Hello? You got him potted up? Oh, is that strange? Congressman? We're going to have to get our engineer over here and try and figure out what's going on. We've got Congressman Pocan on the line, but we can't hear him. So we can hear me. So while we're trying to figure out why we can't hear Congressman Pocan, I'm going to... Oh, he just hung up and he's calling back again. So we may actually... Yeah, did we restart our phones this morning? Yeah, we did. Okay, all right. In any case, just here's some of the news, and while we're waiting for Congressman Pocan to wire in and for everything to work properly. I got an email from the Congressional Progressive Caucus, their statement on the sanctions legislation. Congressional Progressive Caucus co-chairs Representative Raul Grijalva and Representative Mark Pocan released the following statement today regarding H.R. 3364. This is the legislation on sanctions against Iran, North Korea, and Russia. And they note sanctions can be an important tool when used in conjunction with effective diplomacy to deter threatening behavior. To that end, we agree with the underlying goals of this to prevent Iran and North Korea from developing destabilizing advanced ballistic missile technology and ensuring that Russia is deterred from interfering in our democracy. Although progressives vote for different reasons today, we are united in this. He says, unfortunately, President Trump's advisors have demonstrated an eagerness to raise tensions with Iran. This is what I said yesterday. Somebody called in and said, what do you think about these sanctions? And you know, my response was, you know, I don't want to, whoop, hang on just a second. I got to restart my my call screen software, don't I? Looks like everything just died. So anyhow, I said I'm really concerned that the Trump administration is going to use this to blow up the Iran deal, and that may well happen, which is a terrible thing. And then Congressman Mark Pocan sent out a set that aside. Congressman Pocan sent out a press release this morning. I can't put him on the board. I'm waiting for my call screen software to quit. It's forcing quit. Yeah, because I need to know when to kill it. Anyhow, Congressman Pocan issued this. Congressman Mark Pocan, a member of the LGBT Equality Caucus, today released the following statement regarding President Trump's decision to reverse military policy. Now, this is, and this is about transgender folks. The reporting that I had seen did not indicate that this was a reversal, which I think is very strange because, you know, President Obama actually opened the military to trans people and said that if you're trans in the military, you can come out now. And now Trump is saying, no, we're not going to do that. And we're not going to do that because we can't afford it, which is a nonsensical excuse. So anyhow, I'm going to, let's fill the break, and I'm going to hit a break right now. And we'll try to get Congressman Pocan on the line, but in just a moment. So, hey, Chris, you need to turn up the audio here on the spin trackers. Thank you. So, we're everybody's doing somebody else's job today. So it's bring your compatriot to work day. We'll be right back. Stick around.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Technology gods willing, we will be back with Congressman Pocan. This woman is saying some really cool stuff. M-U-S-C-A-T-O, Danielle Moscato. She says, this is to Donald Trump in response to his tweeting about Saturday Night Live, right? She said, do you know how many children went to bed tonight without enough food to eat? Do you even care? What is wrong with you? No, of course you don't know these things. You don't even know what a blind trust is, and you call yourself a businessman. You're pathetic. You ran for president for attention. You're a fake, a fraud. You never wanted to win anyway. We can all see it. You're not fooling anyone. You're scared and overwhelmed, and you have absolutely no idea what you're doing, and it shows. You think you're all that we're all too polite, too aghast to call you out. I see through you, Donnie. I'm calling you out. You're a joke. With every fiber of my being, I'm disgusted by you. And you know what the real secret is? You're disgusted by you, too, she's saying to Donald Trump. That's why you surround yourself with gold and beautiful women that you objectify. You know you're a loser, so you try to make yourself feel better, feel successful, authoritative with things. Money. You're an imposter. You're a fraud. I'm ashamed of you. The world is ashamed. You spout nonsense. Millions of illegal voters, even you don't believe it. It's absurd. You think we're stupid? You think we don't know what you're doing? Trying to control the narrative, get your followers to distrust the media, the polls, news reporters, so that they must turn to you for what's true, what's real? There's a name for that. It's called propaganda. We know what you're doing. We will not allow you to suppress votes with this nonsense. We will not allow you to trample our civil rights. We will not allow you to destroy the progress we've made. We will resist. I call upon progressives, Democrats, independents, and Republicans to resist. Hashtag resist fascism. Resist Donald Trump. Resist crony capitalism. Resist hypocrisy. When Donald Trump lies, acknowledge and call it out as propaganda. When he tests boundaries, acknowledge and call it out as fascism. Resist. We cannot wait and see. Real Donald Trump is telling us here and now what he's going to do. Believe him. Millions of illegal votes is not a claim about reality, despite what Donald Trump's pretense. It is a warning, a threat. Pay attention. Resist. Donald Trump is telling us he'll suppress our votes. Our democracy is at stake. We cannot wait, let him enact policy, then whine. We must resist. Donald Trump tweets so that we forget that his kids will run a company in a so-called blind trust while sitting in on diplomatic meetings. Trump tweets so we forget that he's stacking his cabinets with the very same people he proposed to remove from his influence. Trump tweets so we ignore that he's clueless at governance. The more outrageous his tweets, the harder it is for us to keep up. We see you, Donald. We know exactly what you're doing. It's not working on us. You're a disgrace and you should be ashamed. The next 4 years will be brutal for me and my fellow civil rights activists. Not all of us will survive, but we will resist. We will resist Donald Trump till racist police are imprisoned. We will resist till full equality for women. We will resist. We are ready. We will resist until abortion is accessible to everyone who needs it, until LGBTQ are safe and healthy, until people of color are safe. Donald Trump, you can fight us on it, and you are and you will, but you will lose because history is on our side. We may not live to see it, but we know we will win. We will fight you every step, so be ready. You can't stop progress no matter how hard you try. I hear in her voice the echo of Sophie Scholl, who, along with her brother, started in Nazi Germany in the 40s, the White Rose Society, which was the resistance movement against Hitler, the student resistance movement against Hitler.
Hi there, I'm Marie with Free Speech TV. Your support, whether through giving donations, volunteering, or spreading the word about Free Speech TV, has made it possible for the only independent progressive news network to exist. And for that, I want to say thank you. Now you can give to the network powered by the people by donating an unwanted or used vehicle through our Vehicles of Change program. If you have an old car, RV, or even a motorcycle, Free Speech TV can use it to grow and thrive. You can make a bigger difference in supporting Free Speech TV by giving an old car. It's a great way to support the network without having to dig into your bank account. Just call 877-378-8669 and ask for more information about Vehicles of Change. Again, the number to call is 877-378-8669. If it has a VIN, we'll take it in. Thank you.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. I was having trouble getting Congressman Pocan on the line, and we thought, gee, maybe I should restart my computer. But this being a Windows computer, it's taken a full 5 minutes for the restart, and it's still not there yet. And I'm trying to get there. And, I'm so sorry to inflict this on you. Oh, there we go. So, anyhow, there's come on, program, come on up. There we go. The Senate today is voting on this repeal-only health plan, apparently. We'll get to Congressman Pocan in just a second, as soon as I can get this damn software up. It's amazing how we live with technology, and we get used to technology. We take technology essentially for granted, and then when it doesn't quite work the way we hoped it would, we get all upset, and I guess that's just like human nature and reasonable. but I'm still waiting for my computer to reboot. And this is insanely frustrating. So anyhow, in the second hour of our program today, I want to get into an extended rant about what China is doing in Asia, in the Middle East, and in here we go. Okay, Louise, I've got the call screen software open, but I don't see Congressman Pocan on the board. I don't know why. Yeah. Can you put him on the board out there? Thank you. My apologies. In fact, I'm gonna, here's an interesting story from the Washington Post today while we're trying to figure out our technical problems here. This is one surprising way money can buy happiness, according to scientists. If you were given $40, writes Jenna Gallegos in today's Washington Post, or yesterday, actually the day before yesterday's Washington Post, if you were given $40 on the condition that you had to spend it on something that would make you really happy, what would you do with that money? Some people might go shopping, others would treat themselves to dinner or a movie, a few might even donate to a cause, but what about that using that $40 to buy yourself more free time? Now, this is a concept that doesn't occur to a lot of people. It's like, well, wait a minute, I don't have that much money, and buying free time, I mean, what's the deal? But this is a study that was published in a peer-reviewed scientific psychiatric journal, PNAS. They found that people who buy time by paying someone to complete household tasks are more satisfied with life, and it's not just wealthy people. That was the really interesting thing. There's 7 surveys of more than 6,000 respondents in 4 countries. And across all surveys, Louise, is it possible to simply put Congressman Pocan on the board from out there? Troy? Louise? Can you put... You need to turn up the speaker so Louise can hear when I'm talking to her. Excuse me. Oh, he's on the board? He's on the air? Just put him on the air. You can't put him on the air from out there? Oh, there he is. I've got him now. Okay, Congressman Pocan.
I'm here.
Oh, my God. I am so sorry.
No worries.
Nate is usually running our board. Louise is today because Nate is now running our video and Chris, who runs our video, is running our audio. And it's just, which is nobody's fault. It's just, and apparently something got dropped.
No problem.
Anyhow, glad to have you with us, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
So, and we already have calls for you, and there will be more to come, no doubt. So where would you like to start today?
Oh, I'll tell you, I think we can go to calls as soon as you like. I mean, what's going on, obviously, is the health care vote in the Senate. They're still having a difficult time doing anything, although they did vote to take up pretty much anything because they didn't know what they were taking up when they took the vote yesterday. But, I think that tells me they'll probably put down some kind of a trimmed down version just to get to conference committee. So we're still going to have to fight for months probably, maybe to protect our health insurance.
Yeah.
Donald Trump still fighting with Jeff Sessions has been interesting. And then today, watching a 5-time draft dodger explain why transgender people shouldn't serve in the military. That's been my morning so far. Yeah.
Hey, I have a technical question. Never having been a legislator and only watching the process from afar, there's talk that the Trump strategy here, or Mitch's strategy here, is that they're going to pass some very, very, weak repeal bill. I mean, it might just only repeal the requirement that you buy health insurance, the individual mandate. And, because it's something that everybody in the Senate can say, oh, yeah, what the heck, I'll vote for that, or at least all the Republicans. And then it goes to conference. Now, conference committee is where people from the House and people from the Senate get together, and they basically take the House version and the Senate version, which would be very, very different under this scenario, and they rewrite it, they amend it, and when it comes out of conference, does it have to go back to both the House and Senate to be voted on before it goes to the president? Please elaborate this process for us and where this might blow up in Trump's face.
That is correct. The only thing that I've always been told when something comes out of conference committee, it's unamendable at that point. So whatever they put together in conference committee could be a final version, but, some of the rumor is same thing, that they'll do a skinny version of a bill just to get it to conference committee, and then they can kind of maybe blame each other if nothing happens. But it's certainly, the Senate, I think, is just looking to get a vote to claim they did what they could to move it forward, and then whether or not something happens is really going to depend on how hard people, especially in August when everyone's home, really have good, strong conversations with their elected officials. But that should be the format. It goes to conference committee. Something allegedly will come out of there and go back to the House and Senate before it goes to the president.
Yeah. Okay. So you want to pick up some phone calls? Let's do it.
Absolutely.
Okay. Carol in Monessen, Pennsylvania. You are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, Tom. First, I want to say she reminds me of Scholl as well. Do you have her name, the woman who wrote that article?
Which article?
The one you read that you said reminded you of Sophie Scholl.
I think you might have been responding to the book report or the rant that we did in when we were during our break, and I didn't listen to it, and it's from a show from last year. So I'm sorry, Carol, I don't have that off the top of my head.
Well, that isn't why I called anyway.
Okay. You have a question for Congressman Pocan?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Please ask your question.
Okay. Congressman?
Yeah, hi, Carol.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
We really enjoy it when you're on.
Oh,
you're
thank
very
you.
good.
I enjoy it, too.
I want to ask you something about Trump. First, I have two questions about Trump. First of all, how long do you think the American people will go on supporting a president who governs by tweets and who enjoys destroying people's lives on Twitter? And my next question is, do you agree with me that this is not ideology on his part? I think he is simply setting out to unravel and undo and reverse everything that would be considered Obama's legacy. Those are my statements.
Thank you.
Gotcha, Carol. So thank you. So for your first question, I think what we're finding is there's about 35, 36% of the people that are sticking with him so far pretty much no matter what he says, does, tweets, says to Boy Scouts, go down the list of crazy things that he's done, and they still seem to be there with him. So I think, he's going to have that base. Having said that, that's not enough electorally to hold on to elections in 2018 or the presidency, so that's the good news. We just have to make sure that, we're continuing to test him at what he's really about so that, at least the other 65% of the people can, know what he's about. Secondly, I'm trying to figure out exactly what this guy is, and I think, quite honestly, a lot of people are. He just does this strange populist sort of governing, and at times Steve Bannon pops up, at times other Republicans pop up, but in the end, this is the 71-year-old guy who tells you to get off his lawn and gets cranky about a little bit of everything. And let's face it, he's a extremely wealthy person who's looking out for himself, number one, and his family. And I think that's really where he governs from. I mean, I think there's a problem with the Emoluments Clause that he is holding on to his business dealings. I think there's a problem with Russia because I think more and more we're finding there's probably some collusion with folks surrounding him, if not him himself. And this is all about one rich guy and how to get richer. And that's, I think, what we're dealing with. More and more I see his actions every day.
Yeah, not to mention his involvement with oligarchs, whether they be Russian or American or both.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is, I think this is probably going to be his Achilles heel. That and the possibility, which I've been floating for a long time in this program, that he's not actually a billionaire, that ever since his last bankruptcy, when the U.S. banks started refusing to lend to him and he ended up going to Deutsche Bank,
well, in fact, he's
so
broke. Insistent that Mueller is not looking at his taxes, right?
Yeah, well, that's what he's freaked out about.
Yeah.
And I think it's because, it'll demonstrate that this guy's actually underwater. He's probably more broke than I am. More broke than any of us. I mean, it's incredible. Anyhow, Congressman Mark Pocan with us for the hour, or what's left of it, taking your calls. Will be more of Middays with Mark right after this.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Back with Congressman Pocan right after this break here at the bottom of the hour.
We're reading today from the Thom Hartmann Reader here at Thom Hartmann University. This is from page 13. The title is The Story of Carl. Carl loved books and he loved history. After spending 2 years in the Army as part of the American occupation forces in Japan immediately after World War II, Carl was hoping to graduate from college and teach history, perhaps even at the university level, if he could just hang on to the GI Bill and his day job long enough to get his PhD. But in 1950, when he'd been married just a few months, the surprise came that forced him to drop out of college. His wife was pregnant with their first child. This was an era when husbands worked, wives tended the home, and being a good father and provider was one of the highest callings to which a man could aspire. Carl dropped out of school, kept his 9-to-5 job at a camera shop, got a second job at a metal fabricating plant, working with molten metal from 7 p.m. to 4 a.m. For much of his wife's pregnancy and his newborn son's first year, he slept 3 hours a night and caught up on the weekends. But in the process, he earned enough to get them an apartment and prepare for the costs of raising a family. Over the next 45 years, he continued to work in the steel and machine industry. In the later years, as a bookkeeper manager for a Michigan tool and die company, as 3 more sons were born. Carl knew he was doing the right thing when he took that job in the factory, and he did it enthusiastically. Because the auto industry was unionized, he found he was able to support his entire family, all 4 sons, on one paycheck. He had a fully funded health insurance program, an annual vacation, and a good pension waiting for him when he retired. Carl had become a member of the middle class. He may not have achieved his personal dream of teaching history, but he had achieved the American dream. He was self-sufficient and free. Working with molten metal can be dangerous, but the dangers were apparent, and Carl took every protection to protect himself so that he could return home safely to his family. What he didn't realize, however, was that the asbestos used at the casting operation was an insidious poison. He didn't realize that the asbestos industry had known for decades that the stuff could kill, but would continue to profitably market it for another 20 years while actively using its financial muscle to keep the general public in the dark and prevent the government from interfering. A couple of years ago, Carl tripped on the stairs and ended up in the hospital with a compression fracture of his spine. He figured that fall had also caused the terrible pain he'd been experiencing in his abdomen and his chest. Doctors, however, discovered that his lungs were filled with mesothelioma, a rare form of lung cancer that is almost always caused by exposure to asbestos. Mesothelioma is terminal, and its victims die by a slow and painful suffocation. Just because some corporation put profit before people, Carl got screwed. I was Carl's first child. My dad faced a painful death, but at least his job in a union shop left him with health care after retirement. Most Americans don't even have that reassurance anymore. More than 45 million Americans don't have health insurance to cover expenses for a serious illness, and 5 million lost their health insurance between 2001 and 2005, which is when I wrote this. And it's not just illness that worries most Americans today. Americans are working more and making less, getting harder and harder to just get by. There's a reason for the pain Americans are suffering. The America my dad grew up in put people or profits. The America we live in now puts profits above people. In my dad's America, 35% of working people were union members who got a living wage, health insurance, and defined benefit pensions. These union benefits lifted all boats because they set the floor for employment. For every union job, there was typically a non-union job with similar pay and benefits, meaning roughly 70% of the American workforce back then could raise a family on a single paycheck. People who were disabled and couldn't work could live on Social Security payments, and the elderly knew that they would have a safe retirement, paid for by pensions, Social Security, and Medicare. The gap between the richest and the poorest had shrunk rather than widened. That America is disappearing fast. The minimum wage is not a living wage. Workers are now expected to pay for their own health insurance and their own retirement. Pension plans are disappearing. 30,000 General Motors employees lost theirs just in 2005, and there's continued talk about privatizing Social Security, the Republicans' grand goal. The safety net is ripping apart, and the results are that the middle class is shrinking. The rich are once again getting richer, and the poor are getting poorer. The inflation-adjusted average annual pay of a CEO went up from $7.7 million to $9.6 million just between 2002 and 2004. Meanwhile, from 2002 to 2004, the inflation-adjusted median annual household income went down from $46,058 to $44,300. In other words, ordinary people's income went down by $1,600, while CEO pay went up by $1.8 million a year. From 2001 to 2005, America has lost 2,800 manufacturing jobs just in 3 years. If you don't count jobs produced by the military-industrial complex, the number of private sector jobs created since 2001 decreased by 1,160,000. Although 67% of large employees, well, you get where we're going with this. Anyhow, it's the Thom Hartmann Reading. Great. Smith did it tweets. Gotta love live radio. Yes. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. It's our Middays with Mark segment, our hour. Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls. And Congressman Pocan, you're here with us?
I am.
Okay, and I can still hear you. That's marvelous. Dave in Federal Way, Washington. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hey, Congressman Pocan. First, I just wanted to say I think it's awesome that you reminded all of us that Donald Trump is, in fact, a draft dodger. And also, I have a personal dislike of Scaramucci. But there is this belief that he is somehow, benevolent or decent for the gay community. And, this just proves that I don't think that he is.
He being Trump?
Not why no, Scaramucci. I see nothing good about Scaramucci at all. He's anti-science. He's anti-reason, in my opinion. But, there is this belief that he is somehow a little more liberal or whatever, but I reject that. But my question is about this BCRA and this motion to proceed. What bothers me about it is it really gets confusing, as to what individual Congress or senators, their motivations are. And the Portman Amendment is saying, of the BCRA, the Portman Amendment was saying something about granting more monies to the states to stabilize the markets. And I'm wondering about that. I'm wondering, especially the Republicans that voted against that, do you believe they intentionally want to destabilize the markets in the states?
So let me say two things. One, I think they're just trying to desperately find anything that can get the votes to get out of the Senate to say they repealed the Affordable Care Act and then get to conference committee. And whether or not something comes out of it, at least they can claim they voted to get rid of it, right? So they don't have to deal with the daily tweets that right now Jeff Sessions is experiencing from President Trump. I think that's at one level. So whether it be the Portman Amendment or others, they're just looking for that place they can thread the needle to make the claim. I do think, though, that there's a part that I've heard from President Trump several times that if they can't get this done, they're just trying to figure out how they can destabilize it to say, see, we told you so, the Obamacare is not going to work, when we've acknowledged there are things that we need to fix around the Affordable Care Act. But 20 million people now have access. You can't just throw everyone off because you want to provide a tax cut to the wealthiest and to big corporations and big pharma. So, I think watch what they say and what they do this week, maybe two different things. But we need to keep the pressure on no matter what, because we've been winning. They would have passed this thing months ago and destroyed it if it wasn't for all of us calling up. So we need to keep this pressure on, and everyone's going to be home in August. You need to set up meetings with your member of Congress and your senator. You need to go to their town halls. You need to demand town halls if they're not having them, because a lot of them aren't having them. And you need to figure out how to get heard during that August month to keep the pressure on, because I think that's really the key thing. They are going to do everything they can to try to prove they're right. A big part of it is just getting rid of Obamacare and not necessarily worrying about the replacement, because this is about tax reform.
Yeah, amen. Reed in Rockford, Illinois. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hello.
Hey, Reed.
I was two things. One is about health care. I see that Democrats aren't really saying anything about the poison pills that were put into health care with when it was passed. And I'd like to see them talk.
Are you talking about Marco Rubio's doing away with the risk corridors?
Huh? Beg pardon?
Are you talking about Marco Rubio nuking the risk corridors last year?
No, I'm saying that when we passed health care, I guess, they had already put timed things in it that would financially strap it and limit it down the road because they didn't want it. So the only thing they could do was put in poison pills that would either defund it or destabilize it down.
But you don't know the specifics of any of those, Reed.
Thing on the part of the Republicans.
Okay, Congressman, thoughts on that? I'm unfamiliar with that argument.
Well, I think what you started to say, Tom, is probably, I think, more succinctly what the issues are, right? Some of the things we know, like the risk corridor issue and others. I do hear Democrats talking about them. I think what we're trying to say right now is, look, let's fix the Affordable Care Act where we know it needs to be fixed, which is completely doable without kicking 20 million people off of their health insurance, without destabilizing the market so that people who aren't on the Affordable Care Act wind up paying more, like they will under, so far, every Republican plan I've seen put forward. So, I think our real goal here is, one, make sure they don't get rid of the Affordable Care Act, and two, they actually sit down with Democrats and do our job as members of Congress and fix the current system that we have that's working for at least 20 million people now having a new access, and everyone benefiting from things like the pre-existing conditions. Now you can get coverage. There's no lifetime cap. Women pay the same as men, and all the rest. So I think, while certainly there are things that we would have liked to have seen, like a public option certainly would make it a much more competitive overall system. We're going to talk about those things, but right now our goal is to make sure they don't get too far in completely tearing apart the Affordable Care Act.
Russell in Hickory Hills, Illinois, listening to WCPT. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yeah, thank you for taking my call. Mr. Pocan, I'm hearing already that the Freedom Caucus is talking about raising the debt ceiling, but have no problem cutting $1.5 trillion out of the budget. How does 40 guys lead the spineless guy you call Paul Ryan by the nose? And when's he going to tell him, no, you have to raise the debt ceiling? Because this is getting to be embarrassing.
Yeah, I'll tell you, Russell. First of all, I have always supported a measure that would automatically increase the debt ceiling when we automatically increase spending. Why have two separate steps at it? Because I think it just gives people like the Tea Party one more reason to obstruct, because that's what they do. Here's the bottom line is, former Speaker Denny Hastert, who now I guess is out of prison. I used to say he's now inmate whatever, but now he's out of prison, had a rule that said you had to have 218 people in their conference, which is the majority in Congress, support something for it to come to the floor for a vote. Paul Ryan agreed to do that when he became Speaker, which is something the Tea Party wanted because it gives 40 people the power of 218, the majority, because if they say no, you don't have 218, and then they can't put things on the floor. It's standing up to that 40 people who don't believe in government, period, but ran for office to run it, and realizing you can get votes across the aisle, we have to govern. So you're right, Paul. It's up to Paul Ryan to show that he can stand up and actually be a leader and stand up to the Tea Party, which he hasn't been willing to do so far.
Jim in Bellingham, Washington. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yes, I'd like to bring up the topic of global warming. Chris Hedges had Christian Parenti, son of Michael Parenti, on his RT show, and they were talking about the dire consequences of global warming, and they said that there's stuff that can sequester greenhouse gases, actually take it out of the atmosphere. I don't know if they call it biochar or other things too, but I would like to put out to your congressman that I would like to see a lot of more speaking like that in the Congress toward the Republicans who deny that it even exists. And, most Republicans, to my knowledge, are very pro-military, and I do think we know that the military actually acknowledges that climate change exists. They're busy making plans for making adjustments based on catastrophes in Africa and elsewhere. And so I'd like Mr. Pocan to respond.
Yeah, Jim, so, I think there is a lot said in Washington around climate change by the Democrats. Whether or not the corporate media picks it up is whether or not you're going to hear about it in the end, even though we put a lot out in social media. we have a caucus called the SEEK Caucus, Safe Energy Climate Caucus here in the House of Representatives, and all of us are members weekly, either on the floor, writing columns, doing other things to help promote and talk about what's happening with climate change. And we've seen the Senate do all-night sessions on it. There's a lot that happens, but if it doesn't get picked up in the media, you might not get a chance to see it. What we're fighting against are a bunch of Republicans who either don't believe in science or believe in big contributions from polluters, one or the other or both, that make them reluctant to actually act on climate change, which is, again, why we have to have the people lead on this issue, because that's how we can enact change here in Congress.
Well said. Congressman Mark Pocan is taking your calls for the hour in our Middays with Mark segment here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Congressman Pocan represents the 2nd District of Wisconsin. You can find his website at pocan.house.gov. You can tweet him at @RepMarkPocan. And we'll be back in just a moment with more of your calls.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls right after the break. And welcome back. Leonard in South Pasadena, California.
Hi, how you doing, Tom?
Hey, Leonard. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Well, good to talk to you, Congressman Pocan, and I'm very proud that you're here. I have a question. Looks like Trump wants to build the military. There might be a good reason for that. What if we continue to ignore global warming? And it gets to the point where, if the other countries don't do something, we're all going to die, and they decide to attack us for their own survival. What do we do?
Yeah, I think that's a question that, quite honestly, would happen a little more down the road, right? Because we know the impacts of climate change, even though we're seeing them now. I can tell you in Wisconsin last week we had some storms that took out more trees in my district and did more damage in my district. And the person in the town I live in who does the picking up said it's the worst damage they've seen in 40 years. I mean, we're seeing these wild swings, but not necessarily to the level, I think, that would probably initiate other countries looking at us. But
it's like a bad Kurt Vonnegut novel, you know?
Yeah. I do think, though, that, where our military is concerned is rightfully so. I mean, we could have major catastrophes on the homeland if global warming continues. And, we all should be concerned. The problem is around here, either they don't believe in science, the 2% of scientists who seem to not be clear on climate change, or they believe in the campaign contributions that they get from the polluters that want to keep the way things go right now is just perfect for their profitability.
Alexandra, listening on KBCS in La Conner, Washington. Alexandra, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yay. Thank you both for what you do. Congressman Pocan, I realize that this may be sort of a crystal ball question, but I have a very disabled son. And his life is, Medicaid is what pays for his care. Mm-hmm. What's going to happen?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I'm hopeful that it's not just your story, but your story multiplied by thousands and thousands and thousands of people who are calling their members of Congress and telling these stories. And I think when I hear from the Republican senators who are most concerned, it's around the Medicaid issue, because clearly with Medicaid expansion, a lot of people got access to health care, but because they needed it, and they don't want to take it away from their constituents. So we just have to keep up telling those stories to our local press, telling those stories to our elected officials, because I think that is one of the strongest reasons why they haven't moved forward yet. So if I had to look forward, I think it's going to be hard to do those deep Medicaid cuts based on all the activity we're seeing, but that means we can't stop. We have to continue that activity so that they have to change tactics and go to a plan B or C or D.
Congressman, do you think there's any wisdom to the tactic of going directly to Donald Trump with the fact that the Republicans are advancing legislation that contradicts his campaign promises? In other words, if thousands of people tweeted him on a particular day saying, you promised, and maybe even a link to the video of him saying it, you promised you would protect our Medicaid, and why are you not? That kind of thing.
Yeah, I tell you, I'm honestly, I think at the point right now is that, I'm starting to look at the people who are not sure if he's fully competent to serve in office.
Yeah.
Maybe where I'm approaching, as I see the various decisions he makes, the lack of any kind of continuity, the lack of any compassion. I don't know if it'll work. Everything is worth a try, but contacting members of Congress has been working.
Yeah, okay. Congressman Mark Pocan with us taking your calls. We'll be right back with more. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls. Middays with Mark. James in Spokane, Washington. You are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yeah, gentlemen. Mark, I'm not trying to be mean at all. I'm not trying to hold your feet to the fire. But it seems that most progressives, as you and Bernie, believe that the war on drugs need to be mitigated, if not summarily ended. Just wonder, where are the legislative proposals? I haven't heard of any in the 50 years of this horror show.
Yeah, I'll tell you, James, to be honest, most of them are around marijuana, and quite honestly, this is one where I think the people, again, are ahead of elected officials. We're watching these state initiatives that people are supporting to legalize marijuana. You don't see the same push on, I think, some other harder drugs that you do see on marijuana, but I think marijuana is a huge portal to our prison system, and that's been the one that gets the most attention, and there are multitudes of things introduced around that in particular.
Okay, Diane in Fort Smith, Arkansas. Hey, Diane, thanks for listening to Sirius XM. What's up?
Oh, my gosh, my first time to be on here. Now I have to get really focused. Well, first of all, what keeps coming up for me, as long as we have Citizens United allowing our senators and the whole mess there taking special interest money, we will always have this problem. I call Tom Cotton every day. I ask this question every day, and I do not get an answer. I've never gotten a letter. They just kind of pat me on the head because I know how much money he's taking from special interest, and it's so much more than he's getting from his salary. I even went to his town hall.
So, Diane, what's your question for Congressman Pocan?
Well, I mean, how do we resolve this issue as long as we have senators taking outside money? We will always have this issue.
Okay,
They'll always vote.
No, Diane, I hear you. Here's a recommendation, because when you call the office, and as you said, they pat you on the head. I understand what you're saying, because I hear it from many people when they call offices. They don't feel like it's messages getting sent anywhere. But Tom Cotton's going to travel your state, and for the next month, 5 weeks, he's going to be back home. You need to make sure you try to get in front of him, whether it be trying to schedule a meeting in his office, going to events he's at, public meetings, if he has a town hall, and raise the issue, and don't just accept that brush off as the answer, because you're right. I mean, Citizens United is damaging to our democracy, but we need to really get in people's faces on this, and I think the best way you can do that is you've got 5 weeks and maybe a little less in the Senate, because they're going to stay a little longer, to get them while they're home in your home.
Reed in Rockford, Illinois. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hello?
Hey, Reed, you're on the air.
Yes. I did a little research the other day looking up anarchy, and it talks mainly about not wanting any government. And it occurred to me that maybe this is partly what refers to the newcons or the libertarians. They don't want government. Maybe we should start talking more about anarchy.
Okay, Congressman?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I mean, the fact that the Tea Party don't fundamentally believe in government, but then they run for office to run it, does sound a little bit like anarchy. The problem is it's in the view they see. I always thought the Tea Party was half created by racism, half created by people who do have fundamental libertarian, anti-government beliefs, and we've got this weird hodgepodge that's become the Tea Party. But I understand the point Reed's trying to make.
Yeah, okay. Dwayne in Warren, Michigan. Hey, Dwayne, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hey, Tom. Great to talk to you. First time, long time. Excellent program. Congressman, nice talking to you too, sir. I've heard that the Supreme Court is going to take up gerrymandering next session. If this is in your wheelhouse, can you tell us a little bit about what you know about it and if we can get a favorable result?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, it's based on a case from my home state in Wisconsin, where we have argued that the Republicans in the legislature successfully gerrymandered districts very seriously. And because of it, the case is going to the Supreme Court this fall. So we're expecting, I believe, October, maybe November-ish to have the full debate. And we're hoping, at least in Wisconsin especially, that we'll get something that we can get new maps. But, clearly when you look at Wisconsin, I think we had 100,000 more votes for Democrats for Congress than Republicans, and yet the Republicans have 5 of the 8 seats. And the same thing on our state legislative seats. And this isn't just true of Wisconsin. It's true of your state in Michigan, Pennsylvania, a lot of other places. So this is a big case that could have national ramifications, and we're hopeful that we can have some success in the Supreme Court on this.
Tom, in Media, Pennsylvania, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yes, Congressman, I just have a quick question. I'm a union person and a union representative. I've been one for 26 years. Do you support, getting rid of the Cadillac tax, which threatens many of the quality of the health care that we have now? And if you do, what would you replace it with another tax?
Yeah, Tom. So, in fact, the Progressive Caucus has made part of our budget provisions going back, I think, now 3 years, getting rid of the excise tax. I don't really, the vernacular is the Cadillac tax, but it's a tax that, quite honestly, people who've negotiated good health insurance packages in lieu of salary now are going to be negatively impacted. What we've always argued is if you have a public option, that would more than make up for any loss in revenue that you'd have through getting rid of the excise tax. So I think that's one of the main things we would suggest. But, we've been out there as a Progressive Caucus now, I think, for 3 years saying that we should get rid of that assessment through the excise tax.
Chris in Albuquerque, New Mexico. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Thanks for taking my call, Congressman. I'm a case manager for individuals with disabilities here in New Mexico, and all of the individuals that are on the developmental disabilities waiver, they wait anywhere in the area of 10 to 15 years for developmental disabilities waiver services. All of the individuals rely on Medicaid. So a health care bill such as what they're proposing would not only, hurt and possibly, end up in the result of death of individuals, but all of the service providers as well. I guess my question to you is, where are the Democrats in talking about how the Affordable Care Act is helping individuals? And I'm urging people to reach out to the Republican senators that voted no, and I would guess that those Republican senators have heard from their constituents that depend on Medicaid as well. So that's my question to you: is why aren't they getting out there and talking about, the positive effects of the Affordable Care Act?
Well, and we are. Over and over and over we are. And in fact, we see now in public opinion, people support the Affordable Care Act. They're still not too sure about Obamacare. Again, the irony, because they really went after Obamacare in their attacks. But we've now got people supporting, vast majority supporting the Affordable Care Act. And often we talk about, especially on the Medicaid side, as you pointed out, people with disabilities, seniors in nursing homes. That's all part of that Medicaid population. It's not what the Republicans try to tell you, someone who's too lazy to work getting Medicaid. In reality, it's a lot of different populations. So I think you just got to keep those stories up. Make sure your local media are reporting your local stories. Nothing is stronger than that. Having someone in Albuquerque tell their personal story to the local media helps put the pressure on your representatives in New Mexico.
So he should call the local TV station and say, I'd like to talk to a producer. I've got a story.
Yeah, find out who's been covering that story in the newspaper as well, who's been covering stories around healthcare locally, and reach out to that person and say, hey, I've got someone I want to share a story of. This is someone who's getting Medicaid dollars who needs it to survive.
Right. Or if they see a story in the newspaper. That's brilliant. Congressman Mark Pocan, thank you so much, Congressman, for being with us today.
Oh, absolutely. As always, love it.
And my most sincere apologies for the first 20 minutes. I'm so sorry, but thank you.
No problem.
Thank you very much. Congressman Mark Pocan, you can tweet him and send him a tip of the hat and a thanks for putting up with all this stuff today. Rep Mark Pocan, M-A-R-K Pocan. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com.
Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from the Thom Hartmann Reader, which is excerpts from other books that I've written. This excerpt is from Threshold. And it starts out, we're on page 239. Starts out with, I went to Corral, Peru. It's a town that, or the first mother city, the first original city that has ever been discovered intact. It's 5,000 years old. It has been buried for 4,000 years. It was just excavated in the last decade. I went down to Peru. We did our radio show from there. And I met with Dr. Ruth Shady, who is the anthropologist and archaeologist who's running this. And she said, well, as we sat and ate, I asked her what was the most significant fact about Corral. Here, she said, the civilization was different, contrasting the Corral of 5,000 years ago with the city-states that were emerging in Egypt, India, and Asia at that time. The focus of the culture here was different. When this civilization was formed here, peace was very important. There was no war. She paused and looked at me with a glint in her eye. Why? Why was there no war? She asked, as if quizzing me. It turns out they found this city that had been there for 1,000 years, and there wasn't a single instrument of war or violence anywhere in the city. Music, dancing, flutes, amphitheaters, no war. So then we jump to page 244. Are we innately evil or good, warlike or peaceful? In 1634, in his book Leviathan, Thomas Hobbes stated our culture's assumption of the essentially evil nature of humans, saying that life without the iron fist of church or state would be war of every man against every man, resulting in a society where life is poor, nasty, brutish, and short. A generation later, Jean-Jacques Rousseau and John Locke challenged Hobbes, suggesting that evidence from tribes being discovered across Africa and the Americas by European explorers demonstrated that instead, the natural state of humankind was good, egalitarian, and peaceful. The thinking of Rousseau and Locke explicitly and overtly influenced the founders of the United States, particularly Thomas Jefferson, who saw verification in it in his own contact with Native Americans. Thus began America as an egalitarian experiment, an experiment that has been expanded and developed by nearly 100 other nations in the world that claim democracy, particularly the countries of Northern Europe, where once feared and warlike people, most notably the Vikings of Norway and Sweden, are now among the happiest and most peaceful and self-sufficient people in the world. Yet the Hobbeses of the world are currently ascendant in terms of both war on humans and war on the environment. But what should be done? As I said in Leonardo DiCaprio's environmental documentary, The 11th Hour, the problem is not a problem of technology. The problem is not a problem of too much carbon dioxide. The problem is not a problem of global warming. The problem is not a problem of waste. All of those things are symptoms of the problem. The problem is the way that we are thinking. The problem is fundamentally a cultural problem. It's at the level of our culture that this illness is happening. In my books, I've shared stories from all around the world of cultures that have matured, awakened, and found ways to live in peace, harmony, and ecological balance, and the fate of others that have not. Some are pre-city, Aboriginal, and tribal people. Some are modern communities. Some are fully developed city-states moving quickly in the direction of peace. All offer us a new vision of how life can be in a world where the core assumptions of modern culture are challenged and modified. This is not a radical or new age or easily dismissed concept. It started with the Enlightenment of the 17th century. Its first experiment was the founding of the United States in the 18th century. Flawed, but a great experiment. It flowered throughout the world throughout the 19th century as nation after nation flipped from warrior king states to democracies. It found global acceptance in the 20th century with the foundation of the United Nations, the first international organization whose single purpose was to create, promote, and maintain worldwide peace. And now in the 21st century, as war against both humans and against nature is increasingly being viewed with horror by people around the world, movements are springing up all over the planet to reject the immature cultural paradigms of the past and move us into a post-carbon, post-warfare, egalitarian, and peaceful world where there's room for both humans and for all other life. Then we start a chapter, why and when did war begin? If it's true, as scientists from Peter Farb to Rianne Eisler to Ruth Shady point out, that a prime differentiator between war societies and peaceful societies is the role of power relationships between men and women, the question is raised, why and when does war begin, and how is it related to the relationship between the sexes? Most pre-literate cultures, from those in the Arctic to those in the southernmost tips of South America and Africa, were largely peaceful before contact with technology and our culture. While there was conflict, and often violent conflict, it rarely reached the proportions of organized, sustained, legally sanctioned mass murder that we today refer to as war. As the anthropologist Peter Farb has documented, some Native American societies, for example, the Shoshone, didn't even have a word for war in their vocabulary. Others used organized games to resolve conflicts. Many theories have been put forward for how and why the warrior mentality took over. And then, it goes on to whether this started with animal husbandry or whether it started with agriculture, or where did war begin, and some interesting stuff. So it's in the Thom Hartmann Reader.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Oh, man. Interesting stuff here. The real Donald J. Trump. A tweet. Thank you to the LGBT community. I will fight for you while Hillary brings in more people that will threaten your beliefs and freedoms. Should be who, not that. You use who when you're talking about human beings. But anyway, it's so strange, this guy. So today he's trashing trans people in the military. And there are trans people in the military, and Barack Obama said, feel free to come out. Be who you are. And Trump is like, back to the culture wars. Back to the culture wars. But in this hour, I wanted to talk with you about something that I think is a very, very, very serious issue for a couple of reasons. The first one is this theory of history that suggests that the biggest predictor of a major war, and possibly even a world war, is when an established world power begins to decline in power and influence, and affluence for that matter, at the same time that a previously relatively unimportant nation is rising to the status of major world power. Now, we look back over the last 500-600 years in European history and Asian history, and we can see fairly clearly this happening. Actually, back over the last few thousand years. I mean, this lesson, in fact, I believe in the book that first laid this out, that one of the first theories that they went to was 3,000 years ago, Sparta, Greece, all that. Then 2,000 years ago, the fall of the Roman Empire, and now, of course, as America is declining, and we have been declining ever since the Reagan presidency began transferring the wealth of our nation to our top 1%. We now have the world's richest billionaires and the largest crop of billionaires, and we have some of the world's worst poverty. We have the most prisoners in the world. We have a fairly poor life expectancy, maternal outcome. All the health measures, we're way down in the middle or the bottom of the pile. The United States is essentially falling apart as a result of Reaganomics, and a number of other policies as well. But this is the principal one: neoliberal economics, the so-called free trade. This is something that Richard Nixon started selling in 68. And really in a big way in 69, 70, China and all that. And that then was picked up by some Democrats and, brought us forward to here. So the United States is in decline at the same time that China is exploding. I lived in China for a month in November of 1986 at the International Acupuncture Teaching Hospital there. I was actually studying acupuncture. It was fascinating. And Beijing at that point in time, there were no cars in the city. I mean, I stood on Tiananmen Square, which is right in front of this major, like 8 or 10 or 12 lane freeway road. And maybe once every 5 minutes, a car would go by, typically a large black limousine carrying government officials. The rest of it was just an ocean of black bicycles. The tallest building in Beijing was the Hilton Hotel, which was 10 stories. Now, of course, Beijing is more modern than most of the world's modern cities. So, which brings us to what the United States is doing and what China is doing, and how to juxtapose these for a moment. We are occupying Afghanistan. We've been occupying Afghanistan ever since George Bush invaded Afghanistan, successfully took out the government. It took about 2 weeks, and we have been running an occupation of that country for the last 14 years, or 15 years, however long it's been. Same in Iran as well, of course, but I want to speak specifically about Afghanistan. And it's getting harder and harder to justify that. I mean, we shouldn't have gone in there in the first place, and now, why are we losing treasure and lives to do this? Well, there's a fascinating piece by James Rice and Mark Landler in today's New York Times titled, "Trump Finds Reason for the U.S. to Remain in Afghanistan, Minerals." And they point out that, 16 years of war in Afghanistan, I would say, 1 year of war, 15 years of occupation, however you want to define it. So President Trump, searching for a reason to keep the United States in Afghanistan after 16 years of war, has latched onto a prospect that tantalized previous administrations: Afghanistan's vast mineral wealth, which his advisors and Afghan officials have told him could be profitably extracted by Western companies. Oh, so we should continue the occupation of Afghanistan because we might be able to steal their wealth. Well, that's a very Trumpian idea. Mr. Trump has discussed the country's mineral deposits with President Ashraf Ghani, who promoted mining as an economic opportunity in one of their first conversations. Mr. Trump, who is deeply skeptical about sending more American troops to Afghanistan, has suggested that this could be the one justification for the United States to stay engaged in that country. Stephen A. Feinberg, a billionaire financier who is informally advising Mr. Trump in Afghanistan, is also looking into ways to exploit the country's minerals. Oh, jeez. Save us. God save us. So here's this billionaire who is Trump's Afghanistan whisperer, And the article goes on to say, Mr. Feinberg owns a large military contracting firm, DynCorp International, which could play a role in guarding mines in Afghanistan. A major concern, given that some of Afghanistan's richest deposits are in areas controlled by the Taliban. In 2010, American officials estimated that Afghanistan had untapped mineral deposits worth nearly $1 trillion. And that $1 trillion figure is circulating again inside the White House, according to officials who said it caught the attention of Mr. Trump. In 2006, the George W. Bush administration conducted aerial survey. This is just kind of a Republican thing, you know? Okay, we got the country. How do we steal their money? In 2006, the George W. Bush administration conducted aerial surveys of the country to map its mineral resources. Under President Barack Obama, the Pentagon set up a task force to try to build a mining industry in Afghanistan. Now, to his credit, under Obama, the let's build a mining industry in Afghanistan was like, let's build an indigenous mining industry. Under Trump and under Bush, it was, let's bring in the American mining companies. Laurel Miller, a senior analyst at RAND, points out this could be dangerous. It would be dangerous, says Laurel Miller, to use the potential for resource exploitation as a selling point for military engagement. Yeah, you think? But for Mr. Trump, as a businessman, it is arguably the only appealing thing about Afghanistan. Now here's where it gets wild. China already has a $3 billion contract. Keep in mind, Afghanistan, when we invaded it, was the poorest country on earth with a $2 billion a year GDP. The entire country. Right now, it's around $14 billion a year, but $13 billion of that is our money. It's war. So anyhow, China already has a $3 billion contract to develop a copper mine about 20 miles southeast of the Afghan capital, Kabul. So the Chinese are already there, which brings us to the second part of the story that I wanted to share with you. Iraq, of course, is now essentially controlled by Iran. Iran is, you know, it's a Shia country. Iraq is a majority Shia country. The Sunni minority had held control through Saddam Hussein for decades, but we ended all that when George W. Bush opened the gates of hell with his stupid illegal invasion. So China is now looking at Iran. The headline of a second story in today's New York Times, when you put these things together, all of a sudden everything starts to make sense. These two disparate, separate articles. This is by Thomas Erdbrink, and it's titled, For China's Global Ambitions, Iran is at the Center of Everything. As China, he writes, as China unspools its One Belt, One Road project, which promises more than $1 trillion in infrastructure development. And let me point out, we spend $1 trillion here, and we accomplish, you know, whatever we accomplish. We spend that same $1 trillion pretty much anywhere in the world. You can accomplish 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 times as much because the cost of living is so much lower in these other countries. So China is investing $1 trillion, but that's a massive amount of money in most of these countries. So as China unspools its One Belt, One Road project, which promises more than $1 trillion in infrastructure investment, bridges, rails, ports, and energy in over 60 countries across Europe, Asia, and Africa. Iran, historically a crossroads, is strategically at the center of China's plans. Like pieces of a sprawling geopolitical puzzle, components of China's infrastructure network are being put in place right this minute as we speak. In eastern Iran, Chinese workers are busily modernizing, writes Thomas Erdbrink, one of the country's major rail routes, standardizing gauge sizes, improving the track bed, rebuilding bridges, with the ultimate goal of connecting Tehran to Turkmenistan and Afghanistan. So China is rebuilding Afghanistan's railroads. We can't even rebuild the Northeast Corridor so that Amtrak can run a train without, you know, pitching you all over the inside of the train. Because, you know, of course, we privatized our rail beds. So even if we wanted to, we couldn't. Anyhow, much the same is happening in Western Iran, where railroad crews are working to link the capital to Turkey and eventually to Europe. Other rail projects will connect Tehran and Mashhad with deepwater ports in the country's south. And, you know, and then they talk about once dependent on Beijing during the years of international isolation, they're talking about Iran. Iran is now critical to China's ability to realize its grandiose ambitions. The other route to Western markets is longer. You want to get from China to Europe, basically. It's longer, and it leads through Russia, potentially a competitor of China. So China's just avoiding that. So China's going to be in the catbird seat. And this is where I bring this back to the original point that I made, which is not in either of these articles, which is that the thing that most frequently causes international wars, world wars, major conflicts, is the rise of one major power while another major power is declining. Donald Trump wants to seize the mineral wealth of Afghanistan. China wants to exploit the mineral wealth of Afghanistan. They want to do it collaboratively with the Afghans. Trump wants to simply bring American companies in and steal it. Either way, this has the potential to be a major flashpoint that could lead, in my opinion, to World War III. Pay careful attention to this area, what's going on, even though our media won't.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Clickbait, it doesn't involve dramas or personalities. So our infotainment media is not going to talk about this, but you need to keep an eye on this. Welcome back. Let's see here. Gary in East Point, Michigan, watching us on Free Speech TV. Hey, Gary, what's on your mind?
Tom, I appreciate you, because if it wasn't for your show, you others, Amy Goodman, I don't know what I would do, because you speak truth to power, and that's all you can ask for as a citizen in this country.
Thank you, Gary. What's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, I really wanted to say something about health care, but, you said a lot of things that need to be commented on. But on that health care thing, I want to know how come the Democrats don't call it what it is, a death panel that they claim that the Affordable Care Act was going to cause.
Right.
This is a death panel, and the Democrats need to come on and say, hey, this is the same plan that you said President Obama, even though he insured millions of Americans. Now you're talking about kicking them off. It is truly a death panel. How come the Democrats aren't talking about that?
Yeah, no, it's the death panel right now is the Republican-controlled Senate. And what amazes me is, people are drawing comparisons between John McCain and Teddy Kennedy, because both of them have the same kind of very aggressive form of brain cancer, glioblastoma. And people are saying, oh, yeah, Ted Kennedy came back to cast a vote on health care just like John McCain did, or John McCain did just like Ted Kennedy did. No, it's not just like at all. Ted Kennedy came back to cast the tie-breaking vote to make Obamacare the law of the land, to give health care to more than 20 million Americans. John McCain came back to cast a tie-breaking vote to take health care away from 30 million Americans right after he got diagnosed with cancer, which you would think would cause him to understand what it might be like to be facing a fatal disease and need the help of your physicians. And but no, he doesn't. He doesn't give a rat's ass, and he's not going to do anything about it. So, Gary, I'm with you. Thank you. Your comment is very, very well said and very well taken. Arthur in Davie, Florida. Hey, Arthur, what's on your mind? Thanks for watching Free Speech on Dish Network.
Thank you. And I'd like to talk about the proposed privatization of the air traffic control system.
Sure.
I'm a 36-year veteran of air traffic control. I controlled traffic at the Miami Air Route Traffic Control Center. Mm-hmm. I went through the Reagan strike. At the time of the Reagan strike, I was a staff specialist, so I didn't participate in the strike. But nevertheless, I think we have the biggest and the best and the safest air traffic control system in the world.
Agreed.
And
as a pilot, agreed.
And Donald Trump has the audacity to talk to an audience and talk about the air traffic control system, and he tells the people that what it's like to have held over an airport or near an airport for an hour, and he puts the blame on the air traffic controllers, when actually 99% of the holding time is spent because of weather.
Or mechanicals, yeah.
That's right, and the controllers can't control that.
Yeah.
But anyway, I wanted to say that if any corporation were to take over the air traffic control system, I hope they would realize, or the government would insist upon, that they give the Treasury of the United States at least $1 trillion or more to pay for all the infrastructure that is in the air traffic control system.
Right.
Because the U.S. taxpayer.
No, you're absolutely right, Arthur. And this is the thing when, and we see this from the Reagan administration as well. When they privatize things, they almost always undervalue the public assets, because that's the whole point. I mean, privatizing is like giving it to your crony corporate buddies. But excellent point, Arthur. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I'm Nina Turner, and you're watching Free Speech TV.
Hey, want to hear that clip again? Subscribe to the Thom Hartmann Program on YouTube to see all your favorite show highlights. Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by EcoWine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, EcoWine.com. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And a few other things in the news I wanted to share with you. But, I really wanted to get that China-Iran rant out of my system. I mean, it's just, this has been troubling me ever since I read these two articles this morning in the New York Times. And I thought, holy cow, nobody is connecting the dots on this. To the best of my knowledge. I mean, maybe Chris Hedges or somebody like him who's like, kind of thinking globally. But, I don't see anything in the media that is connecting the dots on this. China is expanding all over the world. When I was in South Sudan with Ellen Ratner, China's all over Africa. We saw Chinese business people, cutting deals and all kinds. We saw them, met some of them in Kenya. We stayed over in Nairobi. In Juba, in the capital city of South Sudan, one of the poorest countries in the world, but right in the middle of Africa, right in the middle of the continent there, or the northern part of the continent, or the north central, whatever. And there's a lot of resources. I mean, South Sudan has oil. The Norwegians are metering it, and the Chinese are buying it. And the Chinese are doing right now in a very careful, steady, methodical way what the United States did in more of a blundering gunboat diplomacy way back 120 years ago of basically finding undeveloped countries or underdeveloped countries. Underdeveloped is a weird word. It suggests that countries should be developed, and that's a whole nother topic, I suppose. But in any case, we found these, we'd go to Guatemala or Honduras or Hawaii even, 120 years ago. The United Fruit and Dole. Go to Hawaii, go to Honduras, go to El Salvador, whatever, and basically buy up a bunch of land and mine it if there's minerals, or grow things if it's got good decent soil, and use local cheap labor and basically extract wealth from the country. This was a major piece of U.S. foreign policy for the better part of 100 years. And arguably, to a certain extent, still is. Well, it is virtually the entire focus of China's foreign policy right now. Only they're doing it a whole lot more smart than we did. I mean, we went in and we said, give us your stuff or we'll blow you up. Or we bribed the senior leadership. We put people in place. We knocked down elected governments in Iran, in Iraq, in Saudi Arabia, actually, I'm not sure about Saudi Arabia, how that all started. But, it's in multiple countries all around the Middle East, all around South and Central America. We went in and we actually altered governments in order to give ourselves and our businesses an advantage. China, instead, is going in and saying, you can keep your country. You can keep your political system. We don't care. We're not ideologues. We just want business partners. And we'll loan you the money to make it happen. And they're going for it.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
More than anything else, this is setting up a collision that could lead.
Welcome to the Thom Hartmann Book Club with Thom Hartmann University. The book we're reading today is The American Revolution of 1800, written by Dan Sisson with a little bit of help from me and mostly edited by me. I wrote a foreword for it. It's an absolutely brilliant history of the election of Thomas Jefferson and the times. So reading from chapter 1, page 9. Starting out, a quote from Thomas Paine. "For it is the nature and intention of a constitution to prevent governing by party." Oh, really? So often in the past century, the political history of America reveals a paralysis in the highest levels of our government. Legislation fails to pass, budgets are voted down, compromise seems impossible, and the problems of the nation are neither addressed nor solved. There have been brief periods, of course, when this was not the case. The New Deal is usually held up as an example of a time when American politicians actually came together to fundamentally transform the nature and the political landscape of our country. But in the generations since then, more often than not, we've seen gridlock rather than collaboration. Conventional wisdom says that's the way it should be. The founders of this country, the men who wrote the Constitution, wanted there to be a loyal opposition to serve as a balance against excessive power in the hands of any one political party or even president. That's conventional wisdom. Not only is that not true, but this pervasive myth has done considerable harm to our nation and continues to do so. The men in power from 1790 to 1801 did not even remotely conceive of the modern two-party system. In fact, the opposite is true. They wish to consolidate and perpetuate a one-party system in politics in the United States, and were successful in their lifetimes. The terms party and faction have had such a long history that they were widely assumed by American statesmen to be part of human nature. This, at least, was the approach taken by the two men most responsible for establishing the theoretical guidelines of the early republic, the early American Republic. James Madison and Alexander Hamilton attempted to analyze the terms in light of their influence on the political system. Their Federalist essays presented an analysis of party and faction that is more than consistent with the history of the terms we've reviewed. Madison referred to the violence of faction as a dangerous vice characteristic of free governments. By faction, Madison wrote, "I understand a number of citizens, whether amounting to a majority or a minority of the whole, who are united and actuated by some common impulse of passion or of interest adverse to the rights of other citizens or to the permanent and aggregate interests of the community." In other words, faction is anti-America. He continued, "The latent causes of faction are thus sown in the nature of man, and we see them everywhere." Thus, party, as Madison understood it, was not something of recent origin. Parties have been around since the beginning of man. And he noted, quote, "The most numerous party, or in other words, the most powerful faction, must be expected to prevail." He ends his analysis on this note: "To secure the public good and provide rights against the danger of such a faction, that is then the great object to which our inquiries are directed." Thus, Madison captured the essence of the term faction and party as they were understood by his contemporaries. The faction and party were inescapably rooted in human nature and produced violence, zeal, animosity, oppression, and danger, all adverse to the interests of the community. He added, quote, "Men of factious tempers or of local prejudices or of sinister designs may by intrigue, by corruption, or by other means first obtain the suffrages, the vote, and then betray the interests of the people." His conclusion is that factions must be broken and controlled. They are at all costs not to be legitimately recognized or encouraged. Madison was not alone in his aversion to faction and party. Alexander Hamilton, too, warns the reader, quote, "Ambition, avarice, personal animosity, party opposition, and many other motives, not more laudable than these, were typical of that intolerant spirit which has at all times characterized political parties," end of quote. Registering his disgust for faction, Hamilton continued, "It is impossible to read the history of the petty republics of Greece and Italy without feeling sensations of horror and disgust at the rapid succession of revolutions by which they were kept in a state of perpetual vibration between the extremes of tyranny and anarchy." Hamilton, we might note, connects ancient history with modern America. The tempestuous situation, he writes, from which Massachusetts has scarcely emerged, he was talking about Shays' Rebellion, evinces the dangers of this kind are not merely speculative. Who could determine what might have been the issue of her late convulsions if the malcontents had not been headed by a Caesar or a Cromwell, end of quote. In Federalist number 77, he describes the influence of faction and party intrigue, connections, and, quote, personal influence in government in a way that was characteristic of the terms from classical times through the age of Robert Walpole. Hamilton wrote, every mere council of appointment, however constituted, will be a conclave in which cabal and intrigue will have their full scope. And as each member will have his friends and connections to provide for, the desire of mutual gratification will beget a scandalous bartering of votes and bargaining for places. What is worth noting here is not only Hamilton's description of the influence of party and faction upon an administration, but his general description of politics. He's describing the politics of England for the previous century and a half. Moreover, he understands that encouraging party and faction at the theoretical as well as the practical level guaranteed that the emergent system of American politics would be propelled into the futile violence and dissension that had plagued every republic in history. Throughout the remainder of his political career, Hamilton reserved a special contempt for parties. The American Revolution of 1800 by Dan Sisson and Thom Hartmann. This woman is... Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Pentagon not aware of Trump ban on transgender people serving in the military. Oh no. What's it all coming to here? Anyhow, it's pick up your phone calls. It is anything goes summer, and we've also discussed a lot of topics so far today, and there's a lot more to come. I'm going to get into an extended riff here about Ryan Zinke and the Interior Department in a few minutes. But Gordon, listening in St. Thomas, U.S. Virgin Islands on Sirius XM. Hey, Gordon, you're on the air. What's on your mind today?
Oh, thank you for taking my call, Tom. This is an honor to be able to speak with you. I've been listening to you through Sirius XM for the last 6 months.
Well, thank you.
And you just struck a chord when you mentioned the article that you took in with regard to China and what they're doing in the Middle East and Africa. I've been living in St. Thomas for the past 26 years, and it's also widely known that China is helping out in Antigua, Dominica, St. Lucia by building power plants and helping out with their utilities. And so I just wanted to say that they're in the Western Hemisphere, and I know they're making a lot of investments in Detroit as well.
Yeah.
But
and they're buying American companies like there's no tomorrow.
Yeah, but they're down in the Caribbean in a big way, and these are small islands.
Yeah.
And I know, it's occurring. So
do you know which
level of diplomacy, via coming in and helping out governments with the antiquated infrastructures, which is prevalent on most islands, because I'm a telephone lineman, so I go down and help out after the hurricanes.
So are there any particular sectors, whether they be natural resources or industries, tourism, energy? You said they're building power plants. Is that pretty much what it's looking?
Basically, well, I know Jamaica has the bauxite, but the other smaller, lesser Antilles islands, most of them are being volcanic. No, they don't really have nothing but tourism. It's 95% tourism until you get further south, which is more agriculture, like down in Grenada, somewhat in Antigua. But they're just cruise ship entities, They're too small.
So why are the Chinese interested?
Most people work for the government,
Right. So why are the Chinese interested?
That's a good question. Because the utility companies, especially, we can take a look at St. Thomas. They can't get any more. They can't issue any more bonds.
Because
just like Puerto Rico.
Because they're in an economic crisis, and so the Chinese are coming in saying, "We'll loan you the money."
Exactly. And so their bond rating is way down. You can, and this is fact.
Right. So it sounds like this.
It's not on the radar.
Yeah, it sounds like what this might be about, Gordon, is that the Chinese are simply trying to establish a footprint in the Western Hemisphere.
Exactly. That's the way I view it.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not a political scientist.
I mean, when the Soviet Union did that with Cuba, we got rather hysterical.
Yeah.
And I'm concerned that the day will come with China when we're going to get, rather hysterical about it. Gordon, thank you for that. Thanks for the information.
Can I just say one other thing?
Sure.
Since St. Thomas and a lot of the islands aren't on the corporate media radar, ICE is really going berserk down in Puerto Rico and in St. Thomas with regard to this immigration ban, and that's something that's not being
really
noticed either. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, man. And you have a lot of, people travel, West Indian people travel from island to island for work pretty much. You got Haitians, you got Dominicans, and, all of them from St. Kitts and different islands. So they go to different islands to go work, and they're related. They have, relatives.
Right.
And they end up staying. And it wasn't up until 9/11 that, the immigration had become so strict. So people, are there illegally. Not only West Indians, but you also have Europeans, people from the Eastern European countries down in St. Martin. Have you visited lately?
It's been at least 10 years since I've been to St. Thomas, St. John's.
Come on visit. I mean, they come on, what do you call it? Tourist visas, and they extend their stays. They stay.
Right. Huh. Remarkable. Gordon, thanks for all the information. I appreciate it.
Many years.
Yeah, thanks for the call. Doug in Lithonia, Georgia, listening on Sirius XM. Hey, Doug, what's on your mind today?
Hey, so I was listening to you when you were talking to the congressman. I've been reading Jefferson Davis's book, The Rise and the Fall of Confederacy. And one of the things...
Wait a minute, is this the General Jefferson Davis or President Jefferson Davis or whatever his title?
President Jefferson
Yeah,
Davis.
okay.
President of the Confederate States of America. What I was surprised at when I read his book, obviously, they decided to split with the Union over slavery. But the other massive kind of, after his chapter on slavery and how, honest and cool they were and all that, and how they were going to eventually abolish it, he then begins to talk about the process of creating the Constitution and all the problems that they had with how it was created. The fact that, the Constitutional Convention wasn't about coming up with an entirely different form of government, but it was about taking the Articles of Confederation and actually making them work better. So they were totally against even the creation of a central government with as much power as the Constitution gave the Congress and the President and so forth.
Yeah, you can read Patrick Henry's speeches at the Virginia Ratifying Convention. There were a bunch of those, mostly large plantation owners in the South, slave owners as well, who were very wary of a federal government that might someday free the slaves.
Right. So
and disrupt their economics.
So the other sort of part of it is that, as far as they were concerned, this was a government that was so akin to what they had left or what America had gotten independence from in England that they weren't for it. Fast forward to now, and by the way, in the chapter where he talks about how this came about, he calls those who are against it conservative, or his conservative friends. And so conservative to them meant people who were loyal to the Articles of Confederation and against the Constitution.
Right.
And so fast forward to today again, what we're fighting against, if you look at everything that conservatives do, it's all centered in making sure that the federal government has no power or has less power.
Right.
They don't want to fund the federal government. We don't collect enough taxes to run the federal government. I mean, everything that they do is against it.
Yep. So you're suggesting that essentially modern-day conservatives want to take us back to the Articles of Confederation.
in effect, if not actually.
Yeah, turn the states into essentially mini nations. Because under the Articles of Confederation, which was our first government, we had 3 presidents before George Washington under the Articles of Confederation. Under those, basically each state was a nation state, all 13 of them. And the Articles of Confederation were basically just a fairly loose trade agreement among the states that regulated. They gave the states the ability to regulate tariffs and borders and boundaries and all that kind of thing, and commerce within their states. And that regulation power for the states was quite broad, so that the southern states could continue to enforce slavery, which was the core of their entire economic system. And it makes perfect sense to me, Doug, because the whole conservative shtick about so-called states' rights and we should be able to have our own literacy tests and our own ID checks and everything else in order to keep undesirable people from voting in Georgia or wherever it may be. It so makes perfect sense. That's interesting. Doug, as much as I'm offended is not quite the right word, horrified by Jefferson Davis, his book sounds fascinating. Doug, thanks for the call.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls after this. Plus, we're going to check in with Talk Media News to find out what's going on with the Welcome back. Charles, watching Free Speech TV on the Dish Network in Alamo, California. Hey, Charles, what's on your mind today?
Oh, hello. It's a very good program that you have.
Thank you. What's up?
Excuse me. This is related to a topic that was discussed earlier about the decay of the United States. And I've been wondering for some time, and I'm sure you're well ahead of me, about how we charter our corporations here, compared to, say, Japan or Germany or much. If I'm correct, the corporations are chartered by individual states, and the most favorable state is Delaware, and so they're chartered essentially with one purpose, which is to make profits. Right. And so all of their actions follow that one purpose. Well, in Japan, I believe the governing bodies of the corporations are based on 3 separate groups. The government itself is 1/3. The government of the labor representatives of labor are 1/3, and 1/3 represents the company. And I believe I've heard recently in Germany, for example, if a corporation or a business gets too large, there's a law that says that it automatically has to have half of its governing board be labor force. And so it goes. And Ralph Nader, my hero, political hero, said that in his campaign that these multinationals should be chartered in Washington, D.C. And I think what are the chances of, or the possibilities of, rather than having a constitutional amendment saying corporations are people, just recharter them on a basis of the modern day.
Yeah, you would be essentially, Charles, rolling us back to 1895 in terms of corporate law. And that would be a good thing in my mind. Prior to the 1890s, every state had their own separate laws about how corporations had to behave if they were chartered in the state, and most states required you to be chartered in every state that you operated. You had to have a separate charter in that state, and every state in the Union had as their first condition of creating a corporate charter was that you must serve the public interest. That was your first condition. Second condition was, and to do this, you're going to make railroad cars and show a profit, that kind of thing. And what happened was in the late 1880s, Ohio said to John Rockefeller, who lived in Ohio at the time, and was running Standard Oil out of Ohio, the Standard Oil Trust. And he had bought hundreds of smaller companies all over the East Coast, from Ohio all the way to the East Coast. And they said that his trust was illegal and his behavior in Ohio was illegal. He was colluding with the railroads to jack up shipping prices on his competitors and kicking money back to the railroad owners and just engaged in some horrible behavior. And so, when that happened, Rockefeller said, oh, yeah, I'm a criminal. Well, what state wants to make what I'm doing legal? And so there was this competition among the states up and down the East Coast to reduce the severity of their chartering laws. Delaware won that race, although New Jersey is what ended up with John Rockefeller. And this is all in my book on equal protection. Charles, thanks for the call. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Let's check in with Talk Media News and find out what's going on in the world today. This report brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com and Loving What You Do, Ellen Ratner's new book. And speaking of Ellen, she's on the line. Ellen Ratner, hey, happy Wednesday, Ellen.
Add one thing to what you were just saying. Of course, John Rockefeller was from Cleveland, Ohio, and the oil company that I grew up with was called Sohio, and it was Standard Oil of Ohio. Yep. So there you have it. It's not that anymore.
Yep, there you go. So what's happening in the world today, Ellen?
On the anniversary of Truman integrating the armed service, Trump banned transgender people from serving openly in the military.
Whoa, today is the anniversary?
Today is, I think, the 69th anniversary of Truman saying that blacks could serve openly and could serve in the military. I mean, you can't make this stuff up.
No, and it's not like, this is some radical new experiment that Trump was holding back. Trans people have been serving in the military for years. President Obama said to them, you're good, you're legal, come out.
Well, what's interesting is there was a RAND corporation, not exactly a lefty group,
far from it,
that did a study on how many people were serving as trans in the military, and it was something like 1,550 was the low number, and up to almost 5,000. It was about 4,600 was the high number, and that's the RAND corporation. Some people are saying it's much greater.
Right. But whatever it is, it's not the big deal that Donald Trump.
He tweeted today in his many tweets. He said, "Our military must be focused on decisive and overwhelming victory." How is it having a trans person going to interfere with victory any more than black people were, or women were, or gay people were, or anything else like that?
Right. If somebody can make it through basic training, God bless them.
Exactly. I could never make it through basic training.
Yeah, I would probably have a hard time, too.
Then he went after his attorney general one more time after yesterday, saying in Youngstown, Ohio, speaking of Ohio, that Jeff Sessions didn't really do anything by supporting him early because he won Alabama so with such a large number of people. Well, of course, but Jeff Sessions came out for him at a time when other people were running for the Republican nomination. And so Jeff Sessions, who had a safe seat in the Senate, stuck his neck out for him. And now President Trump tweeted that how could Jeff Sessions allowed Andrew McCabe to serve as acting FBI director? He said in two tweets, "Why didn't AG Sessions replace acting FBI director Andrew McCabe if a Comey friend who was in charge of the Clinton investigation," and then his second Trump, but got big dollars, $700,000 for his wife's political run from Hillary Clinton and her representatives. Drain the swamp.
Now, here's the equation that I think Trump is making, or the hope that he has, is that during the August recess, that Mitch McConnell will actually gavel the Senate into recess so that he can either fire or coerce Sessions into quitting, and he can replace him very, very quickly. I mean, literally minutes later, with Rudy Giuliani or Chris Christie or bozo of his choice, and that person will then 5 minutes later fire Robert Mueller and put an end to the Russia investigation. The problem with that,
I think that you're absolutely correct. And the other thing is that if I was the FBI director at this point, what I would do is I'd come home every night and say, how much of this more can I take?
Right. Well, and the other problem with that is this piece on CNN by Ted Barrett today saying that, senators are planning to continue procedural moves to prevent the Senate from formally adjourning for recess next month in order to prevent President Donald Trump from making recess appointments when the chamber eventually adjourns through the Labor Day weekend. Using the threat of a filibuster, Democrats plan to force the Senate to hold pro forma sessions. So it's Democrats who are blowing up Trump's plan, and he's going to be stuck with an angry, hurt, injured, wounded attorney general, and he's going to be completely lacking the ability to replace him without going through Senate confirmation hearings.
And he's never going to pass with that because, frankly, if you have two senators who got in the way and they needed Pence to break the tie, Murkowski from Alaska and Collins from Maine, to go against this, can you imagine how many senators are going to go against what he was trying to do to one of their former brethren, Senator Sessions?
Oh, yeah.
It's not going to be pretty.
They will not tolerate it. And this is apropos of this article in the Washington Post, senators on a hot mic, Trump is crazy, I'm worried. That was, Senators Collins and Reid. It's kind of spooky.
Oh, listen, I think that by going after Sessions, who, whether you like Sessions or not, and a lot of Democrats don't, he is one of their own, just as McCain is, and by going after Sessions, you don't understand what you are unleashing. Remember, Orrin Hatch and Senator Kennedy were very close friends.
Yeah. And there are still bipartisan friendships.
I think he does not. I think Donald Trump does not understand how Washington works, and particularly the Senate.
Yeah.
I really don't.
I agree. So what else is going on in the world?
Okay, so now this is very interesting. Debbie Wasserman Schultz had an IT director who got in some real trouble. His wife left and went supposedly with a suitcase full of cash. And then the IT director was a guy his last name was Awan, and he was going to attempt to fly to Pakistan. He was released to do that, but then the court said to him last week that even though he pleaded not guilty, that he could not go beyond a 50-mile radius from his home. So, and this had to do with the fact that he apparently did not tell the truth, and again, everybody's innocent until proven guilty, with the Congressional Federal Credit Union on misrepresentations that he had on a loan. So he was arraigned in court, pled not guilty, then attempted to fly home to Pakistan and was stopped at the airport, and then Wasserman Schultz fired him.
Wow. Now, is this tied up with this whole issue of the DNC and Debbie Wasserman Schultz have, to this day, not turned their servers over to the FBI for forensic examination, and Wasserman Schultz apparently has a laptop?
That he removed some of the servers and did not return them to the FBI for examination. But again, I don't know about that. You're innocent until proven guilty, so I don't know.
Yeah,
okay.
Fascinating stuff.
Also, a couple other quick things. The U.S. Navy patrol ship was in Iranian waters, probably in the Straits of Hormuz. I'm not quite sure where. And there was Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, who also had a ship and came very, very close to the United States ship. The U.S. Navy patrol fired warning shots as it made the approach towards the American ship. And the ship was the USS Thunderbolt, and it sounded 5 short blasts, then warning shots in front of the Iranian vessel. The Iranian vessel halted its approach after the warning shots were fired, but it came within 150 yards. That's very close.
Whoa.
Of the United States ship.
For a ship that size, that's probably less than the length of the ship. I mean, that's amazing.
Okay, and one last story. Representative Steve Scalise, as you know, he was wounded 6 weeks ago in the practice by a man who was later killed. And this was the baseball practice for the congressional baseball game. He was discharged from MedStar Washington Hospital Center, and he is now going to be going into intensive inpatient rehab. They said that he was in good spirits. He was looking forward to the workout that he's going to be getting, and he had to go back into intensive care because he had an infection. Right. I mean, he has not had an easy 6 weeks.
Wow. So, but he's back home now.
We know he's back in intensive rehab.
Right, but I mean, he's not doing it from a hospital room. He's doing it from...
He's in some kind of hospital. I don't know which rehab center he is.
Oh, a rehab center, I see. Fascinating. Ellen Ratner with Talk Media News. Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you.
Great talking to you. We'll be back with more of the news of the day right after this. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com.
Hi, for the Thom Hartmann University Book Club today, we're reading from The Crash of 2016, which might happen in early 2017. We'll see, but it's coming. This is from Chapter 5. Chapter 5 is titled Reagan Kidnapped the Jetsons. In a 1966 article, Time magazine looked toward the future and what the rise of automation would mean for average working Americans. It concluded, quote, by 2000, the machines will be producing so much that everyone in the U.S. will, in effect, be independently wealthy. With government benefits, even non-working families will have, by one estimate, an annual income of $30,000 to $40,000. How to use leisure meaningfully will be a major problem. End of quote. And that was $30,000 to $40,000 in 1966 dollars, which would roughly be $199,000 to $260,000 in 2010 dollars. Ask anybody who was a teenager or older in the 1960s. This was a big sales pitch for automation and the coming computer age. There was even a cartoon show about it, The Jetsons. And everybody looked forward to the day when increased productivity from robots, computers, and automation would translate into fewer hours worked or more pay or both for every American worker. And there was good logic behind the idea. The premise was simple. With better technology, companies would become more efficient. They'd be able to make more things in less time. Revenues would skyrocket, and Americans would bring home higher and higher paychecks, all the while working fewer and fewer hours. So by the year 2000, according to Time magazine in 1966, we would enter what was then referred to as the leisure society. Futurists speculated that the biggest problem facing America in that Jetsons future of the year 2000 would be just how the heck everyone would use all their extra leisure time. And of course, there were also those who worried about what kind of degeneracy would emerge when a nation has lots of money and free time on its hands. Neither happened, and it didn't happen because Ronald Reagan stole the leisure society from us and handed it over to the economic royalists. In 1981, the royalists went right to work, taking down that first pillar on which FDR rebuilt the American middle class, progressive taxation. Taking advantage of the oil shock crisis, neoliberal shock troopers immediately ushered through a revolutionary change in the tax code with the Economic Recovery Act of 1981. The first major piece of legislation signed by Reagan is slashed the top marginal income tax rate from 70% to 50%, cutting estate taxes for wealthy businesses and slashing capital gains and corporate profit taxes. Reagan succeeded a few years later in dropping the top income tax rate even more to 28%, where it hadn't been since the Great Depression. It was the second largest tax cut in history, and it was nearly identical to the largest tax cut ever. Treasury Secretary Andrew Mellon's in the 1920s, the one that created the bubble known as the Roaring Twenties, which eventually burst in 1929. The great forgetting had certainly arrived. The economic mistakes of the 1920s were coming back around. And again, the influx of all this hot money in the market, coupled with a robust deregulation agenda throughout the 1980s and 90s, would trigger a series of painful financial panics. The reason why the Leisure Society could be imagined by Time magazine is because ever since 1900, working people's wages tracked evenly with working people's productivity. So as productivity continued to rise, which was likely due to increased automation and better technology, so too would everyone's wages. And the glue holding this logic together was the current top marginal income tax rate. In 1966, when the Time article was written, the top marginal income tax rate was 70%. And what that effectively did was encourage CEOs to keep more money in their businesses and invest in new technology, to pay their workers more, to hire new workers and expand. After all, what's the point of sucking millions and millions of dollars out of your business if it's going to be taxed at 70%? According to this line of reasoning, if businesses were to suddenly become more profitable and efficient thanks to automation, then that money would flow throughout the businesses, raising everyone's standard of living, increasing everyone's leisure time. But when Reagan dropped that top tax rate down to 28%, everything changed, as you can see in this graph. Now, as businesses became more profitable, there was a far greater incentive for CEOs to pull those profits out of the company and pocket them, because they were suddenly paying an incredibly low tax rate. And that's exactly what they did. All those new profits, thanks to automation, that were supposed to go to everyone, giving us all higher paychecks and more time off, instead went to the top, to the economic royalists. Suddenly, the symmetry in the productivity wages chart broke down. Productivity continued increasing because technology continued improving, but wages stayed flat. And again, since higher and higher profits could be sucked out of the company and taxed at lower and lower levels, there was no incentive to reduce the number of hours everyone worked. In the 1950s, before that Time magazine article predicted the Leisure Society, before that article was written, the average American working in manufacturing put in about 42 hours of work a week. Today, the average American working in manufacturing puts in about 40 hours a week. This means that despite the fact that productivity has increased 400% since 1950, Americans are working on average only 2 fewer hours a week. If productivity is 4 times higher than in 1950, then Americans should be able to work 4 times less, or just 10 hours a week, to afford the same 1950s lifestyle when a family of 4 could get by on just 1 paycheck, own a home, own a car, put their kids through school, take a vacation every now and then, and retire comfortably. But all that was wiped out by Reaganomics and Ronald Reagan. And that's just the beginning of the setup for the crash of 2016.
The book is
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Well, the Boy Scouts of America have been, as Brad Reed writes over at Raw Story and on Alternate, criticized by some for, rather wishy-washy response to to Donald Trump. I can't even say it, I'm sorry. To Donald Trump going before the Boy Scouts, and first president in 80 years to go before the Boy Scouts and go off on a political rant. And, it was horrible. So you would think that the president of the Boy Scouts of America, Randall Stevenson, would be horrified and that he would be seriously calling out Trump for his misbehavior. Well, here's the problem. Randall Stevenson, who is the president of the Boy Scouts of America, has been for about a year, is also the president, the CEO of AT&T. AT&T is trying to merge with Time Warner. That merger is before the, I believe it's the Justice Department that oversees mergers and acquisitions, to see if it's, a violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act, which basically it almost certainly will not be considered a violation because we haven't really enforced that law since 1982. But it's still up in the air, and it's considerable leverage that the president has over Randall Stevenson. So, surprise, surprise, that the Boy Scouts are not all that upset, at least not officially. They're just saying, oh, we're just we're nonpartisan. We don't, Okay, to other serious matters, and this I think is a big one. Donald Trump jokes about being added to Mount Rushmore. A lot of people are treating this like some kind of silly joke. He made remarks at a rally in Ohio last night, I believe it was, that he should be added to Mount Rushmore. And of course, anybody with a decent copy of Adobe, whatever the current version of the program for drawing, Photoshop, was able to pull this thing up, and they're creating all these bizarre pictures of, Mount Rushmore with Donald Trump on it, or the four presidents up there with Donald, showing Donald Trump faces and things like that. He says, now here's what I'd do. I'd ask whether or not you someday think I will be on Mount Rushmore. This is exactly what he said. But there's a more serious part to this. Mount Rushmore is part of our national park system, and as such, it's controlled by the Interior Department. The Interior Department is controlled by a guy named Ryan Zinke, who used to be a right-wing Republican cokehead congressman. And Mike Pence recommended him to Trump as the guy to be in charge of Interior, and Zinke just loves it. I mean, he when on his first day in work, he rode a horse to his office building here in Washington, D.C. I mean, this guy understands theater. He has been, for the last couple of weeks, he's been out west going from national park to national park, wearing the whole cowboy outfit right down to the boots and the hat, and talking like a cowboy, and, hey, I'm the head of the Interior Department, and I'm going to, well, as Coral Davenport and Nicholas Fandos wrote in today's New York Times, the headline, as Interior Secretary swaggers through parks, his staff rolls back regulations. And they write, as the secretary hopscotches across millions of acres of western parks, monuments, and wilderness, with his Stetson sporting swagger, a crew of political appointees in Washington has begun rolling back the conservation efforts put in effect over the 8 years of the Obama administration. Many of those appointees spent the Obama years working for the oil and gas industry. Yep. The petro-billionaires are at it again. Their work has been swift, writes Davenport and Fandos in today's New York Times, or in the 25th, yesterday's New York Times. Their work has been swift. Mr. Zinke's staff on Tuesday filed a legal proposal to rescind the nation's first safety regulation on hydraulic fracturing or fracking. We don't even have a single safety regulation on fracking yet. Or I guess we do. It's a proposal to rescind it. They are exploring a proposal to loosen safety rules on underwater drilling equipment put in place after the 2010 BP spill in the Gulf of Mexico. Oh, brilliant. They've rolled back an Obama era order to block coal mining on public lands. So now you can rape our public parks if they happen to have coal under them. They've delayed carrying out a regulation controlling emissions of methane, a powerful greenhouse gas from oil and gas wells. Oh, wonderful. Methane has been exploding in our atmosphere in terms of its percentage. And it's 80 times more potent a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. The agency is also reviewing federal regulations of the sage grouse, a bird whose habitat extends over 11 states and is generally protected from oil and gas drilling. Mr. Zinke says, no one loves the sage grouse more than I do. Right. In the meantime, the secretary has assiduously cultivated his rugged image. Mr. Zinke spent about 40 days, a third of his time, on the road during his first 4 months as secretary, mostly in the West. In Washington, he has eschewed a coat and tie for fishing shirts and boots. He arrived for his first day at work as secretary on horseback. His office is filled with dead animal heads, stuffed animals. And then they write in the New York Times, to conservationists, the act is getting old. However, the oil and gas lobby say that they are delighted. Michael McKenna, Republican energy lobbyist. And by the way, as a lobbyist for the oil, gas, and coal industry, he was, of course, invited by Mike Pence to be part of the transition effort for the Trump administration. So he helped stock the Interior Department, presumably, or at least had some say in it. Anyhow, this is what he said, Michael McKenna. He said, all these guys have been in Interior before. They know a hell of a lot. They're getting the band back together, and they're going back to the Bush administration. The man widely expected, the New York Times writes, to oversee major policy decisions in Washington is David Bernhardt. So this guy is the Assistant Secretary of the Interior. Zinke is the head guy. Zinke, of course, is a cokehead of, long standing. And his assistant, David Bernhardt, guess what the number 2 guy at the Department of Interior used to do for a living? Other than being a Trump transition official, another one. Well, gee, if Mike Pence hired him to be a Trump transition official, that must mean he's a lobbyist, right? Sure enough, he was a lobbyist for the oil industry. He was confirmed by the Senate on Monday as the Deputy Interior Secretary. Mr. Bernhardt lobbied for the oil companies Cobalt International Energy and Samson Resources. His legal clients have included the Independent Petroleum Association of America and Halliburton. Gee, what great news, right? We're selling off our national parks. We're digging them up. We're drilling into them. Ryan Zinke is trying to privatize them, and all the while he's doing a show for the rubes, right? For the Trump voters, for the people who watch Fox. I'm sure Fox News loves this kind of stuff. Hey, we got some great video here, Ryan Zinke. It'll look good. People will believe it. Yeah, right. Let's do that. Incredible.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We are watching not just the deconstruction of the administrative state, as Steve Bannon said, but the deconstruction of the United States of America. It's not a pretty thing. And welcome back. Glennis, watching Free Speech TV on the Dish Network in Cleveland, Georgia. Hey, Glennis, what's on your mind today?
Hi, I hope I can get your opinion on something. My husband and I, of course, are freaked out over everything about this administration. But we keep having this debate back and forth, and I believe that if Mueller can bring Trump and his cohorts to task or to trial, that they will go to prison. And my husband says, no, they won't, because they're rich and powerful, and they'll just walk away scot-free. So I'd just like to hear your opinion, and I'll take your answer offline. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Glennis. Thanks for the call. What we're seeing and what we've seen is kind of an evolution of this process. During the Reagan administration, during the Nixon administration, a number of people actually went to jail. John Mitchell, for example, is Attorney General, got the job that Jeff Sessions has right now, actually went to prison. So during the Nixon era, there were some serious penalties. During the Reagan administration, more senior administration officials were indicted and convicted of high crimes and misdemeanors, of felonies, of federal felonies, than any other administration in the history of the Republic. Yet, because of George Herbert Walker Bush's, pardon powers and Ronald Reagan's pardon powers, very few of them actually went to jail. And then, Bill Clinton came in and didn't hold Reagan or Bush accountable. And then George W. Bush came in and committed massive crimes. I mean, massive crimes. Torture, just torture itself should have gotten him, or at least some of the people in his administration, Jay Bybee and John Yoo and some of these guys who were the architects of the whole torture thing, as a seat in The Hague. But no, the Obama administration came in and said, we're not going to hold them to account. And now Trump wants to hold a member of the Obama administration, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, to account. I'm not sure exactly for what, but he's got his whole locker up thing going. But it's not going to happen. And not that it should. I mean, I'm not sure that there's anything there. But the Obama administration had to be one of the cleanest in history. And if for no other reason than he was our first black president, and anything that he did, everything that he did, was subject to hyper scrutiny by the white power structure of the Republican Party and the white power structure of the United States, for that matter. So it's just pretty astonishing, when you get right down to it. It's just pretty astonishing. So anyhow, how are we doing? I got 35 seconds. Yeah, it's. I got to tell you this story. We're talking about Trump today saying that he doesn't want transgender troops. The military, the Rand Corporation, estimated that having transgender troops, some of whom may be going through surgeries for the process, could cost the U.S. military between $2 and $8 million a year. $2 to $8 million a year. You know how much the military spent last year on Viagra? $41 million. So it'd be just a fraction of what we're spending right now on Viagra. All erectile dysfunction medicines, the U.S. military spent $84 million. That would be Viagra and Cialis and whatever the other ones are. $84 million. Having trans soldiers would cost us $2 million. But Trump says it's too expensive. That's sick or not? We'll be back.
Hi, I'm Valerie with Free Speech TV. We're proud to provide you with independent, unfiltered news and documentaries. And as our valued viewer, you can help us continue bringing Free Speech TV well into the future. Join our Pearly Gate Rebels, our planned giving program. Your gift of any size will help ensure democracy endures through an informed citizenry. You can donate property, money, or assets. It's easy. My spouse and I are proud Pearly Gate Rebels. We're doing our part to ensure that Free Speech TV will be here to deliver thought-provoking news and information well into the future. Join us. Call 877-378-8669 or email me at valerie@freespeech.org. Rebel against media owned by billionaires and become one of our Pearly Gate Rebels today.
Welcome. Oh, where'd the music go? It's there. Okay. Hey, welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And let's pick up some of your phone calls here. Paulette in Allen Park, Michigan. Hey, Paulette, what's on your mind?
Yes, hello.
Hey, Paul.
I'm watching right now a live video of the National Center for Transgender Equality. They put out a statement that says that the Attorney General's office, led by Jeff Sessions, not only did President Trump promise today to kick out 15,000 transgender military service members, but it also says the Department of Justice is now also about to go into federal court saying transgender people across the country can be fired, evicted, and denied health care because of who they are.
Oh my.
And I'm calling because of the anger that I'm experiencing here today, because the discrimination that goes on against transgender people, and most of it coming from Republicans with these bathroom bills and these bathroom laws and everything else, is just getting so out of hand. You know, the other day I was talking to somebody who referred to me as a whatever. They couldn't call me a he or a she. They just said whatever, which means that I'm not even a human being. So it's just very upsetting to me, and that's why I was calling you. I've been watching your show and listening to you on the radio for like 12 years, forever. It seems a long, long time, and I love your program, and I listened to your Brunch with Bernie program that you used to have, and I just wanted to call in and just let you know how horrible it is that transgender people go through these kinds of things all the time. And, you know, I'm struggling here. I'm on Medicaid. I'm trying to get the full surgery for myself. And to hear this kind of thing going on all the time is just so disturbing. So I just wanted to call and voice myself to you.
Thank you, Paula. I'm so sorry to hear about what you go through. I well understand it, but I've never experienced it, so I guess I can't fully understand it. But I'm with you, and we're all with you, and I hope it gets better. And I'm so sorry to hear about this. The reality is that because the Republican Party has no ideas, they have nothing to offer the American people. They are here solely to serve the interests of billionaires and transnational corporations. They have to get they have to get enough votes to hold public office. And historically, the way they have gotten those votes is by trashing, by creating an other. The same way Hitler did with Jews. The Republicans have been creating an other in the United States, and it was black people for a long, long time, and it still is, of course, many Republicans, and now Fox News trashing, Black Lives Matter, et cetera, et cetera. But then they went from black people to let's trash gay people, and then America kind of accepted gay people and gay people getting married, and so then it was like, okay, well, what's the next minority group that we can pick on? And it's you, Paulette. It's trans people, and it is so wrong. It is evil politics. It is the ugliest kind of politics. It is the ugliest underbelly of this country. And I'm so sorry it's been inflicted.
I lost a number of Facebook friends because they were voting for Trump, okay, because Trump, during his campaign, said that he was for transgender and for LGBT rights, and he went out with one of the LGBT flags and gave a big demonstration that supports LGBT, and I was telling them, no, he doesn't, and no, he won't. And I warned them all that this was going to happen, and this is just one of the things I'm afraid of what's going to happen next. I'm just afraid of what's going to happen next because of the people that he puts in charge, like Jeff Sessions. And it doesn't matter, even if he fires Jeff Sessions, the next person will be just as bad. How will they be any improvement? Everybody he's put in there, he says he's going to drain the swamp. All he did was put more swamp dwellers in there. Yeah. So it's just really scary right now for us.
And it's not just the Trump administration. I would be willing to bet money, if I was a betting person, that tonight on Fox so-called news, particularly on Tucker Carlson or Sean Hannity, they'll have some poor hapless trans person who is semi-articulate, and they will make a fool of him or her. It's just just to pile on, right? These guys, the whole right-wing machine, living in service to the right-wing billionaire class, particularly the billionaires who make their money off extractive industries, and they've got to create an enemy in the minds of quote average Americans, and this is a story of the evilest kind of politics, the using of bigotry for political purposes. And yet it's one of the oldest kinds of politics. I mean, the Romans did it, the Greeks did it, we do it. And a lot of us thought, particularly with the election of President Obama, and when President Obama came around and said, yes, I'm in favor of gay marriage, and then we saw this very rapid transition in this country, and then he said to trans people, you're more than welcome to serve in the military, et cetera. A lot of people thought that Obama was, that this was the high point. This was, and not a high point that we were going to come down from. This was the next logical step in the progression of the awakening and opening of the heart of America. And now what we discover is that, the swamp creatures, saw President Obama and saw what he was doing and heard what he was doing, and it activated their hatred, their bigotry. And I think, Paulette, we have to respond to it with truth, with outrage, and with love. And unless you have a better idea.
No, I don't have a better idea. You know, we have to get out and vote and get the word out to people to vote, you know.
Yeah. Don't let fear and bigotry be the thing that drives your voting. Yeah, amen.
You know,
Paulette, and I don't mean your voting. I mean all these people out here who are listening to these right-wing politicians. And, you know, it's just wake up, guys. Paulette, thank you so much for the call, and I wish you the very best. Thank you so much. We'll be back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
The military right now is spending $84 million a year on Viagra. Having trans people would cost it $2 million. But Trump says that's too much. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club, and today we're reading from Unequal Protection, How Corporations Became People and How You Can Fight Back. This is from page 98, the subchapter, The Supreme Court Takes Over. As Charles and Mary Beard, they were famous historians in the 1930s, wrote in The Rise of American Civilization, which is their famous historical record of the United States, quote, "But the states had to reckon with the Federalist interpretation of the Constitution by John Marshall, who, as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States from 1801 to 1835, never failed to exalt the pro-business doctrines of Hamilton above the claims of the states. Marshall, appointed to the court by Federalist John Adams, who had appointed for life only Federalists to all federal judgeships, was what today would be called a judicial activist. As the Beards wrote, quote, by historic irony, he, Marshall, administered the oath of office to his bitterest enemy, Thomas Jefferson. And for a quarter of a century after the author of the Declaration of Independence retired to private life, the stern Chief Justice continued to announce old Federalist rulings from the Supreme Bench. In 1803, during the second year of Jefferson's presidency, Marshall took on a power for himself and future Supreme Courts that made President Jefferson apoplectic. In the Marbury v. Madison case, as the Beards related, quote, Marshall had been in his high post only 2 years when he laid down for the first time, in the name of the entire court, the doctrine that the judges have the power to declare an act of Congress null and void, when in their opinion it violates the Constitution. This power was not expressly conferred on the court by the Constitution, although many able men have held that the judicial branch of government enjoyed it. The principle was not positively established until 1803 by Marshall's ruling in this case. End of quote. Jefferson, shocked, bluntly expressed his concern to his old friend Judge Spencer Roane, the son-in-law of Patrick Henry and a justice on the Virginia Supreme Court. If this opinion be sound, Jefferson wrote, then indeed is our Constitution a complete felo de se, legally a suicide. For intending to establish 3 departments, coordinate and independent, that they might each check and balance one another. This decision has given, according to this opinion, to one of them alone the right to prescribe rules for the government of the others, and to that one too, which is unelected by and independent of the nation. Jefferson continued in full fury. The Constitution on this hypothesis is a mere thing of wax in the hands of the judiciary, which they may twist and shape into any form they please. It should be remembered as an axiom of eternal truth in politics that whatever power in any government is independent is absolute also. In theory only at first, while the spirit of the people is up, but in practice, as fast as that relaxes. Independence can be trusted nowhere but with the people in mass. They are inherently independent of all but moral law. My construction of the Constitution is very different from that you quote. It is that each department is truly independent of the others and has an equal right to decide for itself what is the meaning of the Constitution in the cases submitted to its action, and especially where it is to act ultimately and without appeal. A judiciary independent of a king or executive alone is a good thing, but independent of the will of the nation is a solecism, a blunder, at least in a Republican government. In his decision putting the Supreme Court above the elected officials, the legislature and the president, John Marshall was echoing Hamilton's Federalist mistrust of any form of government constrained solely by those elected by the people. Kings had faced challenges, the Federalists argued, and fought back because as kings they could force decisions without having to wait for a consensus of the people.
This powerful federal judiciary, only partially answerable to the people, the Federalists believed, was essential to the survival of the nation. As Hamilton wrote in the Federalist Papers in number 23 about whether there should be constraints in the Constitution that would prevent the U.S. government from operating outside the will of its people. Quote, these constitutional powers ought to exist without limitation because it is impossible to foresee or define the extent and variety of national exigencies or the correspondent extent and variety of the means by which may be necessary to satisfy them. The circumstances that endanger the safety of nations are infinite, and for this reason, no constitutional shackles can wisely be imposed on the power to which the care of it is committed. Hamilton's argument is essentially what was said by the Bush administration lawyers who argued in their legal briefs for massive increases in presidential powers post 9/11. Madison, as an ally of Jefferson, rebutted Hamilton's worldview, perhaps most eloquently, in the Federalist Papers number 39, when he wrote, it is essential to such a government that it be derived from the great body of society, not from an inconsiderable proportion or a favored class of it. Otherwise, a handful of tyrannical nobles exercising their oppressions by a delegation of their powers might aspire to the rank of republicans and claim for their government the honorable title of republic. Jefferson further elaborated his arguments for three independent and equal in power branches of government, as well in numerous writings during the 1780s as the Constitution was being formed. But that was then, and this was 1803. The deed was done by Marshall, and the Federalists had won. That said, there is no doubt that Marshall, like Hamilton, believed he was doing the best thing for the nation, that he had served as a soldier during the Revolutionary War. In the 1819 McCulloch versus Maryland decision, for example, he referenced government deriving all its power from and by the people. Anyway, the book is Unequal Protection. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And Brian in Fort Collins, Colorado. Hey, Brian, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Thom. Thank you so much for your program. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
When I was in law school, there was a line of argument that was described as a parade of horribles, and that's an apt description of the Trump administration.
Brian, I'm having a really hard time understanding your words. Your phone sounds garbled. Is there anything you can do to clean that up?
I'll do my best, Thom. Is that better?
That's a little better, yeah.
Okay. Anyway, parade of horribles in law school turns out to be, instead of a description of a line of argument, an apt description of the Trump administration. But what I called you about, Thom, is the People's Platform. Are you familiar with that campaign?
I don't know of it as a campaign, no.
Okay. Well, basically what it is, Thom, is Progressive Democrats of America, Our Revolution.
I'm familiar with this, yes. Absolutely.
Oh, okay. So I was just mostly calling to publicize that people should go to hashtag People's Platform and sign up. It consists of 8 pieces of legislation, 8 bills that have been introduced in the House of Representatives, ranging from H.R. 676 to the Robin Hood tax, but it covers the broad spectrum. So 8 issues that people...
Yeah, no, I'm familiar with it, Brian. And Brian, I'm sorry, I'm going to move along because your phone is so bad that I'm only picking up every other word, and it's got to be agonizing for our listeners. Brian, we'll try again another time. Thank you. But yes, the People's Platform is solid, and frankly, I think it should have become the Democratic Party's platform. Judith in Holbrook, New York. Hey, Judith, thanks for listening to Sirius XM. What's up?
Hi, Thom. How are you?
I'm well.
I love your program. I'm 74, and I tell everybody I'm still going to college, so I drive around listening to you for 3 hours because you are a professor.
Oh, bless you, Judith. Although you can get radios for your home. You don't need to be burning fossil fuels.
That
what's
being
up?
said, the all the money that our illustrious president is going to save us by banning transgender from the military, I hope he'll take it a step further and ban Viagra, because I just read that the military spends $84 million a year on the little blue pills.
That's right. And it would cost $2 million a year if even most of the transgender people in the military were still in some sort of a transitional process and needed surgery. It would cost $2 million a year, and it's $84 million for the Viagra. And Donald Trump says we can't afford that $2 million, so we can't have trans people.
I know. He's such a disgusting joke.
Oh, and he does it on the 69th anniversary of Harry Truman integrating the military.
Yes, well,
that is the insane irony.
I know. Well, I don't think he's intelligent enough to know that it was the 69th anniversary. Yeah. I think he's just an ignorant putz. And I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but I did anyway.
Yes, you did anyway, and it's just fine. Judith, thank you so much.
Thank you for your... and God bless.
Amen. Back at you. Thank you, Judith. Scott in Canaan, Maine. Hey, Scott, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I just wanted to say something to your not your last, but a couple callers ago. Kudos to him. I've never heard that before. Swamp dwellers.
Yes.
That was great. I'm always looking for little things like that, but that was good. So, tell him he's not alone if he's still listening. Anyways, I called about Boeing. Of course, by now you've heard that they're getting ready to lay off over the next year and a half, 2 years, 100,000 people, and they will be moving to China. With that, they'll be taking the technology that was pretty much, it was funded by the public. I mean,
yeah,
research
by and large.
Development. And they're taking all that with them because, as you know, China says if you want to use our cheap labor, you have to bring the technology with you.
Yep.
And they're after a number of other countries.
So where, Scott? I confess I had not heard that Boeing was going to axe 100,000 jobs in the United States. I've not seen it in any.
It's 60, and then next year another 30, and they've already announced they're moving to China. Yeah.
Is there any publication that I can look at today that I can find an article about?
Boy, I wish I did.
That's okay. I can use the search engine. It's no problem.
Your other show.
Yeah, I'll track it down.
Pardon?
I'll track it down. So your point about all this, Scott.
My point is, I have a tendency to kind of watch what corporations instead, what people say, and there's a lot of corporations moving still to China.
Oh, Carrier yesterday, announced that they were moving 300 people down to Mexico from that plant that Donald Trump
just moved another 8.
Yeah.
So it's and we're still being gutted. Literally, this country is being gutted. There's nothing left, and they're fighting about health care and all this stupid stuff. And in the meantime, we're just consistently being gutted.
Yep.
I mean, we don't make anything. I think I told you once before, a country that ceases to produce will soon cease to exist.
Yep.
We are on the way.
Yeah, it's we're down to 11% of our GDP now is manufacturing, and no industrial economy has ever long lasted after they drop below the 15% threshold. We were at over 20% of our GDP was manufacturing when Reagan came into office, and now it's 11%. It's an absolute screaming disaster. Scott, I got to move along, but thank you for the call. Very well said. Lori in Santa Cruz, California. Hey, Lori, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Just wanted to say I admire your ability to listen and reason, which are rare qualities anymore, and I appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
My subject is the two-party system. I find myself a little confused now because I've given up on both the Democrat and the Republican some time ago. However, I live in California and find myself having to vote for the California Democrats at times. Definitely. I think we're doing all right there. But is it better now to go ahead and try to reform the Democratic Party, or are they both so broken we should give up on both of them and find alternatives?
I think the only choice that we have is to do with the Democratic Party what the Kochs and friends did with the Republican Party, which is take it over, get inside it and take it over. They did it with force of money, just kind of brute force of money, and lots and lots and lots of paid toadies. And we can do it with the force of people, with grassroots people. So I think, by all means, the Democratic Party is not only salvageable, it's $1 billion nonprofit corporation. And the cool thing about it is that whoever has the majority of the seats in it controls it. I mean, it's a democracy. It's a democratic institution, small d democratic institution. And so, if you become a precinct person in Santa Cruz, California, and I become a precinct person here in Washington, D.C., and, if enough of us all over the country step into our local Democratic parties, we can flip them progressive. And then when there's a critical mass of local Democratic parties that have gone progressive, the National Party goes progressive. I mean, this is just the natural way it happens. It's also how the Kochs flipped the Republican Party. They spent hundreds of millions of dollars funding the Tea Party and other groups like that, Americans for Prosperity and whatnot. And those groups then, reached out to average people and said, get involved. You'll remember the Concord group that I've played the videotapes of, the YouTube clips of for years and years, back in 2008, telling people, in the wake of the shock of the Obama election, telling people how, important being a precinct committee person is. It's, in most cases, a volunteer job. Sometimes it's a paid job. And those are the people who decide who the primary candidates are going to be and what the platform is going to be. And as this guy, the point that he makes is that the precinct committee people are the most powerful politicians in America. And it's very easy to become one. And the reason why is because, if you're deciding who's going to be the primary, who's going to be the Democratic Party candidates in the primary. Now, he was talking Republican Party. He said, okay, so you've got a Republican Party. We get to pick who's going to be in the primary. If the Tea Partiers have taken over the majority of seats in that congressional district, in that party, then we can just make sure, we say, sure, you'll have a primary. We'll have 5 candidates going against each other. They're all Tea Partiers, but you'll have 5 candidates. And that way they know that at the very end of the day, in all probability, if the Republicans win that House seat or that Senate seat, the person who's going to be sitting in that seat is a Tea Partier. Doesn't matter which one, it's a Tea Partier. And, it's the same thing on the progressive side. So the Democrats need to be taking over the Democratic Party. It's sitting there. It's waiting. It's wide open. They are looking for help. They're looking for ideas. They're looking for support. I realize there are some places where you're going to come up against a, kind of crusty, stodgy, old bureaucracy. But that's not true of most of America. And even in the places where it is true, just show up at the next meeting with half a dozen friends and you can overwhelm them by numbers. Lori, I got to run, but thank you for the call. It's one of the most important questions that's been asked all day. Thank you.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We'll be back with more of your calls right after. And welcome back. Greg in Devil's Lake, North Dakota. Hey, Greg, what's on your mind today? Thanks for watching Free Speech.
Hi, Tom. It's always been my opinion, and ever since advent of the Internet, I've been able to read up and discover, just how much it's gone on. That United States, we've always had the gunboat diplomacy, and it sounds like China's doing it the right way. Instead of rape, pillage, and plundering these countries' natural resources, China's going in there and helping them. And as far as I'm concerned, we were only in Vietnam to get the rubber.
Yep. Well, or the aluminum. I mean, there's a lot of natural resources in Vietnam too, and arguably that's what the French were in there for, up until 1956. So yeah, I don't disagree. And the Chinese are doing it with a very deft touch, a very light touch, whereas we went in with the blunderbuss. And
yeah.
So, yeah.
And I'd just also like to say another thing, with those railroads. That was always my thought, is that, why aren't we building railroads in Afghanistan if we want to help them, a nation building Iran, Iraq? I mean,
Yep, build the infrastructure.
Railroads are the backbone of any nation,
Yep, railroads, roads, airports, I mean, sewer systems, water treatment systems, high-speed internet. I mean, there's so much infrastructure that Afghanistan lacks, and instead we've been giving companies like Halliburton and other defense contractors literally hundreds of billions of dollars to build buildings that then electrocute people. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, Greg.
I'm against those companies because they're doing the jobs the Army should be doing.
I agree. I absolutely agree. And
I wonder who will bomb those railroads in Iraq first, the U.S. or Russia?
Yeah. Well, Russia's kind of washed their hands of Iraq. The only reason that they're still in Syria is because they've got a military. Their only deep water port on the Mediterranean is in Syria, or in that region rather, is in Syria, and so they're just protecting, not just, but I mean, in Syria they're protecting their military interests, just like we would if there was a revolution trying to overthrow the Emir of Qatar, for example, which it looks like Saudi Arabia is trying to lead right now, which is going to put us in a very, very awkward position if we find ourselves basically fighting Saudi Arabia. Greg, I got to move along, but thank you for the call. Well said. Keith in Rapid City, South Dakota. Keith, we got a minute to the break. What's up?
Hey, Tom. Long-time listener. Just retired. Now I got time to call you.
Oh, great.
Hey, Tom. Anyway, we always talk about the Reagan tax cuts of the 80s and, what's going on with all that. I'm just wondering, what did Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan come up with to agree upon so the Democrats would sign off on all those massive tax cuts?
That's a good question. I'm not a scholar of that era of history. I mean, of the minutia of it. I don't frankly know. There was, this whole Lafleur curve and all this stuff, there was a major, major sales effort for that, for cutting taxes on rich people, with this rationale that it was going to improve the economy, it was going to make the country stronger, and quack, quack, quack. And I think, some Democrats got caught up in that, but clearly it was majority Republicans. But there were, that was back in the day when there were a number of conservative Democrats too, and it was supposed to, it was supposed to be an experiment. Clearly one that didn't work out so well. Keith, that's a good question for. Who's the guy who wrote a book called "Tear Down This Myth"? There's a really great book about the Reagan years. I would refer you to that book. We'll be back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Devin in Houston, Texas, listening on Sirius XM. Hey, Devin, what's on your mind?
Hey, how you doing, Tom?
Good. What's up?
I just wanted to, first of all, what that guy said about the Caribbean, if I were you, I'd look into that. Being from there and having a parent from the British side, I'm from the U.S. side, U.S. Virgin Islands, it's not as easy as he says. But
to move around, you mean?
With China, say again?
To move around from island to island?
Well, you'll see people there, I'd say it's kind of easy to get in to some degree illegally now more than it was in the 70s, but at first, when I went to Tortola, I didn't need a passport. I even know most of the people in that immigration office. They even use American money because of the proximity to the U.S. Virgin Islands.
Sure.
You need a passport now to the point where you didn't before.
Yeah.
You'll see people from Antigua and Anguilla and St. Kitts and St. Thomas more so than the other U.S. Virgin Islands.
Well, I think his point was now ICE is cracking down, and now that you need the passport, that makes a lot of sense. But you wanted to talk about China and the Caribbean?
Yeah, what China's problem, because I have a brother and another relative who lives in China.
Mm-hmm.
I speak some Cantonese. They speak both Cantonese and Mandarin.
Mm-hmm.
The Chinese call themselves Zhongguogyung, Center Earth people. They have the similar mentality to us, but they have a bigger problem. They have a whole lot more people. So what they're doing, they need space, they need material, and they need employment for these people. So they're saying, yeah, we will give you this infrastructure, loans, but more people have to do the work. And they're buying up these businesses while they're down there for their people to have like an infrastructure, the community. And you know how America, we do stuff to Mexico like with NAFTA and stuff, but there's no American for those people to vent their anger at. That's not the case with China. The Solomon Islands in Indonesia had their Chinatowns burnt down because with those Chinese companies and people buy up the business, they're getting help from mainland China and they're pushing the local businesses out. And then these people are retaliating.
So there's been backlash in Indonesia and Malaysia and whatnot.
Oh yes, because like it's China is the problem they have. They want to do what we do, but they also have another problem. They have so many people. They just don't need employment. They also need space.
Right. You know what struck me when you said that, Devin? Have you ever heard the word Lebensraum?
No.
Lebensraum is the German word for room to live, as in living room, not the room in your house, but space to live. And Lebensraum was the rationale that Hitler used for the Anschluss, for annexing Austria, and for his invasion of Poland and Czechoslovakia, was that Germany needed more room because its population was growing. So when you said the Chinese need more room, I got goosebumps. I mean, it's like, boy, I heard that story before. Not to say that the Chinese are behaving like the Nazis, like we've been saying. You know, they're doing all this with a very soft touch, whereas the Nazis, you know, went in with guns and whatnot. That's fascinating, Devin.
They're fighting a bubble that's about to burst because, you believe it or not, there's still ghost cities in China with these massive high-rise buildings.
Yes,
but they won't lower the prices to let these people in there. So the quickest way they can think to bring these people up economically is to export them to smaller, lower wage, weaker places.
That's fascinating. That's fascinating. Devin, thanks for calling, and thanks for sharing that information. It's great to hear from you. Mark in San Francisco. Hey, Mark, what's up?
Not much, Tom, but I wanted to talk about what you had mentioned before about Reaganomics is leading to the decline of the United States. And I think that's a great observation because we have a party that basically their agenda is just to transfer wealth from the middle class and poor to the rich, and nothing else is on their agenda, really. And this country can't compete with the rest of the world as long as we have a party that their main priority is to make the fat cats richer.
Yeah, it's true. It's true, and it's a major problem for us. Mark, well said. Thank you very much for the call. Bill in Clifton, New Jersey. Hey, Bill, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, can I quickly say something about China first?
Sure, go for it.
Okay, a friend of mine in California actually exports to China equipment, and he had to go over there for a business meeting where they, I guess, take the equipment, and it's one of these industrial complexes with a checkpoint with very long lines trying to get in. He's online, and suddenly this little red sports car pulls up with two young kids in it blasting the radio. One of them goes up to the temporary gate and pushes it open, jumps in the car, and they drive right through. He found out later they were the general's sons.
Wow.
Anyway.
So they were princelings, basically.
Right.
Yeah, it seems like that's a growing problem in China. The princeling, very privileged and pampered children of the ruling class and the new oligarchs.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay.
You wanted to talk about Steve Bannon.
Right. He's at the center of everything. He's been leaking stuff. He's had a war with Trump's children. You know, Ivanka and as ditzy as they are, her husband were a moderating influence there. And he's the one that probably leaked out stuff about Jared and everything else. And he's the one whose philosophy Trump has been following. And he's untouchable, and he probably knows the problems, you know, the real story behind Russia. So he's got that over him. I mean, that's my gut feeling, because I haven't heard his name mentioned in a long, long time. And he's there.
Yeah. Well, Bannon made the cover of Time magazine a month or three ago, and it apparently really angered Donald Trump. And because Trump, this is, Spicer was getting too much airtime on TV. It angered Trump. So they went to, no audio, no video press conferences.
Right.
And Bannon pulled himself back because he was on the edge of getting fired because he was eclipsing his boss. But he's still a very powerful man in the White House.
Unfortunately, I think he's got the biggest brain in the White House.
I don't disagree.
One other thing, do you think that they should pass a law, anyone who has access to the nuclear codes has to have a background check and possibly Army psychological exam? It makes perfect sense, except that
in the United States, we have put all that stuff into the realm of politics. We have, we trust the ability of the people to pick the right person. And that's the vetting process right there, is the elections. The problem is the elections have been so badly distorted by Citizens United and Buckley, by these billions and billions of dollars coming from the billionaire class and the transnational corporate class, that that we've got Donald Trump is the bottom line, and that we've had a series of illegitimate Republican presidents prior to Donald Trump. I just wrote a piece for Alternate about this. You'll probably see it tonight or tomorrow. So, until we get rid of that corrupting influence, just expect more of the same, Bill. Bill, thanks a lot for the call, and thanks for listening to Sirius. Thank you all for being with us, and don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. Tag
You've
your
been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242.
Or visit tomsbeets.com.